Did you know that Warcraft III spawned entirely new game genres like tower defenses, auto chess, and MOBAs? The beauty of Reforged is we can play the old maps for that nostalgia kick without seeing the old pixelated graphics. In fact, there's even improvements to the map editor to support even better custom games. The only problem is, most of the best maps are protected, and the developers are long gone. An entire world of modding potential hiding beneath the surface, just waiting to be unlocked. If only there was a way to deprotect all these maps so we could breathe new life into them. I think I can do that. If you're new here, I'm Devin, and this channel is for coders interested in gaming, hacking, and AI. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to deprotect any map, and as a bonus, if you stick around to the end, you'll learn how to embed a cheat pack as well. But please cheat responsibly. You don't want to let your massive advantage ruin the fun for everyone else. Okay, let's get into it. First, let me explain to you what I mean by map protection. So here I have the world editor. If I hit open, Pest Invasion, and hit OK, you'll notice it crashes while it's trying to load. So that's what we mean by protection. If the map was not protected, it would open just fine. And you might wonder why I picked this specific list of maps. Every one of these was specifically requested by one of my viewers. In order to deprotect a map, first we need to understand how to protect a map. Now there are hundreds of possible techniques. I'm just going to show you one because they're all very similar. First, I'm going to make a brand new map, leave everything default, and I'll save it, and I'll call it unprotected. Next, I have a list of tools for deprotecting maps, and I'll show each of these in a few minutes. But first, let's start with MPQ master, and I'm going to use this to extract all of the files out of my unprotected map, and will corrupt intentionally one of the files in order to prevent the world editor from opening it. If I do operation extract all and then go to the folder, here we'll see all of these files. I'm going to move them into a new folder called unprotected, and I'll use that as a backup so that I can do a difference program against another copy of the map, so we can learn what files are changed when we make edits in the world editor. So for example, let's think of something I could change in the world editor that does not affect the real game, but only affects the world editor. Because that's the technique for protection, is we want to crash the world editor, but not crash the real game. An example of that in the tool palette is regions. So I'm going to click here to add a region, and I'm going to draw one box, and then I'm going to save it and call it version 2. So now if I do a difference between these copies of the map, I can see which file was changed and also how it changed. The reason regions are only used by the world editor is because if I go into module trigger editor, this is a graphical coding tool that's built into the world editor, and something it uses is regions. But when the game actually runs, all of that configuration is converted to real code. So the game only needs the code. It doesn't need this graphical representation of the code. That's only to make it easy to edit. So I'm going to use MPQ master again and open version 2, operation extract all, and I'll put it into a version 2 folder. A program I like to use is called WinMerge. And in this case, we're just going to use it to compare. So I'll do file open, and I'll put the first version in the first folder, the second version in the second folder. I'll hit compare. The files highlighted in yellow have changes. The others are identical. So I can simply pick a file, double click on it, and on the left is the original code, and on the right is the new code after I saved it with my changes. So you can see here, a region is simply a rectangle, and a region just has coordinates. So I could code this without visually drawing anything in the map editor if I knew what coordinates I wanted to use. So the visual portion is just for ease of use. The game doesn't actually need it to run. Now, if I look at this W3R file, you'll see that it's binary. So it has weird symbols here. Those are the hexadecimal representation of the ones and zeros in those parts of the file. Something interesting to note is the left side, which had 0 regions, it still had these 8 values. So I can assume it's some sort of metadata that tells me what else to expect in the file when a region is created. So on the right side, almost everything is identical in that metadata section, except for I have a number 1. And that's intriguing because I added one region. And then I can assume everything afterwards is probably the region I created, especially since it has the name of the region. So what if I wanted to use this information to in some way break the world editor, but still keep the game working? One idea would be to change this number 1 to a really big value so that it tries to read regions that don't exist and just crashes. So to do that, I'm going to open up a hex editor. One that I like is called XVI32, but there are a ton of hex editors online. You can just use whichever one you prefer. So I'm going to open inside the unprotected folder, the W3R file. On the left side, I can see a bunch of numbers. So I'm going to assume that this 00 here is the number of regions it's going to read in the file. We want to make a very large value to crash the map editor. So the largest value possible is FF, which is the number 255. And I'll put that in all 4 bytes. So combined, it's actually 2 billion. So now I'm going to save this file and close it. I'll open MPQ Master again, open up the version I renamed to protected, and then I'll right click and say add file, and I'll choose the corrupted version of the W3R file. Now, if I open the protected map, you'll see that it's trying to load regions, but the count of regions is so large that it's looping forever. So now you understand the concept of protection. This particular protection specific to regions is only one type of protection out of many. And this is the difficulty of deprotecting, is you have to understand every possible way that a map could be protected in order to reverse engineer it. Luckily, there are a few common techniques that almost all the maps use. And in addition, there are generic tools that are designed to deprotect any map. And in the event that they don't support a specific type of protection, we'll also learn how to troubleshoot so that we can fix those by hand. So let's start by going over the list of tools that we're going to use. First of all, we have a base map file. That's simply, I opened the world editor, made a new map, and saved it. And it's like a baseline I can use to compare against a corrupted map to see what files might have been intentionally corrupted. I also used MPQ Master to extract the files, and I put them into this folder. Now, I mentioned earlier that W3R is for regions. If you'd like to know what these files all are, a quick Google search will show it to you. This site, I think, is the best explanation. So if I scroll down to the W3R file and clicked on it, here it says it's a file for trigger regions, which is exactly what we discovered on our own. So you could read through all of the other files to learn about them. So because these are the only files required for a map, most likely any intentional corruption of a map for the world editor is going to be inside of one of those 17 files, because any other files are going to be sound effects, 3D models, etc. And corrupting them is likely to crash the actual game, or the game will just work with broken sound or broken graphics. So a coder is not going to corrupt one of those files. Next, we have a hex editor, which simply allows looking at the binary 1s and 0s in a file. We have MPQ Master, which allows extracting files from an MPQ archive, as well as adding files to one. And MPQ is a proprietary file format used by most of Blizzard's games. It's not only Warcraft 3, it's also World of Warcraft, Diablo, StarCraft, etc. And it would be similar to like a zip file. I'm not going to share the download links for each of these files. You should be able to Google and find them pretty easily. But if you can't find one, just send me a message in the comments and I'll respond. An alternative to MPQ Master that I use occasionally, I have under other tools, and it's called MPQ Editor. I like MPQ Master slightly better, but MPQ Editor has one feature that is used occasionally for map protection. And that is, if I open a file like my base map, sometimes files can be hidden because an MPQ file has metadata that says a table of contents of what files are inside of it. And that's inside of this list file and attributes file. If those are intentionally corrupted, you could have files that are in the archive, but the MPQ editor is not able to find them although the game is still able to find them. So a tool inside of MPQ editor is called W3X name scanner. And a lot of other tools have this top portion, which is a way that it searches the entire MPQ file for hidden files, things that have been removed from the list file. But something that does not seem to exist in any of the other tools is this live game scanner. And how this works is it actually attaches to the Warcraft 3 game engine while you're playing the game, and it monitors what sections of the MPQ file are being read at any given time. And it uses that to discover files that it needs out of the MPQ, which are missing from the list file. So the top portion, which analyzes the MPQ file itself, it's going to find 90% of those hidden files. But in the rare event that it misses one, the live game scanner should be able to find the others. And there may still be files in the MPQ which don't really have a file name, but if they're not used in the game while you're playing it, then they're obviously useless files that are not needed. So that's the only reason I would use the MPQ editor instead of MPQ master. Okay, so the other tools we're going to use are MPQ repacker and Deprotect. These 4 programs are really all you should need, and then you can make your own base map files really easily. The other tools I have in here, in a rare scenario, they may come in handy, so I'll just show you that they exist, but you probably don't need them. This top one is called Vexorian's Map Optimizer, and it makes games run faster by deleting files that are not needed for the game itself, that are only needed for the map editor. Deprotect is a tool by Nathan MX that tries to undo some of the common protection techniques, but this is an older program. The Deprotect and MPQ repacker, I think, generally do a better job. Next is MPQ recover. This has that same MPQ scanning concept that exists in MPQ editor, but it does not attach to the Warcraft game engine. And MPQ repacker and Deprotect both have this concept built into them as well. The last one is Silk Object Console. This is also built into MPQ repacker, so that's why I don't think you need it. But Silk is a file format for a simple database structure that can be opened in Excel. And this would be for attributes like of a unit, their hit points, their intelligence, their list of abilities, etc. And one protection technique is to corrupt the world editor version of these attributes, because the game actually uses the compiled representation of those attributes, which is inside of a Silk file. It does not use the visual representation that the world editor uses. So this tool reverses the Silk files back into the world editor files, but again, should not be necessary because Repacker has it built in. So let's start deprotecting. From my list of map files, I'm going to start with Pest Invasion because it's the smallest. And I'm going to Google MPQ repacker, and it takes me to GitHub. This is where all the code for this program is stored, but the one it takes me to is from the original author, Karasik. You don't want this version because you'll notice on the right side, it's 8 years old, and there's a few issues with it. If instead you go to this version, this is actually me, and you'll notice I'm actively working on improving this tool. So my version is going to work better for you. If you want to actually modify the code, you would click here to clone. You would copy this Git URL, and you would use traditional coding tools to download the files, modify them, etc. And you need C++ Builder 2010 in order to run it. Unfortunately, there are actually some compiler errors in the original code that I have not yet fixed, so you can't even run the code. So let me show you the changes I made. If you just want to run the code, click on Code, Download Zip, and the files you want are going to be inside this releases folder. You'll notice there's an English version and a Russian version. The original version, before I modified it, was this Russian. That's going to be very hard for you to use, and that's why I created this English version. And you're probably wondering if there's compiler errors, how did I do that? Well, I'll show you in a second. But now that I've downloaded the zip from GitHub, I'm going to extract it with 7-zip. You can also use the built-in Windows extractor. You'll notice this virus and threat protection window pop up. I think this is incorrect. I've been using the program and it seems to work fine for me. All the code is on the GitHub. If anyone wants to search through it, figure out what Microsoft is complaining about, then please submit a pull request to fix it. So you're going to want to click into this threat protection and click allowed threats and click manage settings. Scroll down to exclusions, add an exclusion, and pick your folder. If you don't use the built-in Windows virus protection and use a third-party one instead, you'll need to do something similar. Okay, so inside this releases, if we open the Russian, you'll see that it's going to be really hard to use this since we have no idea what we're clicking on. If you go back to my GitHub and scroll down, I have screenshots of the Russian next to the English for most of the screens. So if you want to use the original program, this should help you figure out what to click on. But I figured since this is a hacking tutorial, why not do a short segue into how we could hack this program to turn it into English. So I mentioned that the code doesn't compile. If it did, I would simply fix it directly in GitHub, recompile it, and run the code. But since it doesn't, I could just pretend I don't have the source code at all. What would I do to hack this program? There is a tool I like called Resource Hacker. You can Google for it. And it's basically what MPQ master is, but to exe files in Windows. So if I open this Resource Hacker program and I take the Russian version of the executable and open it, on the left side, you'll see a bunch of files that are embedded inside of the exe. And if you search through these files and expand them all, you'll be able to figure out what portions are in Russian. So as an example, this T main form, a form is basically a window and it has a bunch of controls on it. So this file has metadata about setting up the controls that the program needs on the screen. And you'll notice all these sections that say caption have Russian text in them. So all I have to do is open up Google Translate, set it from Russian to English, and then I'll take each of these one at a time, copy and paste in order to get the English translation, and use Resource Hacker to modify it to the English. Then I can hit save, and that's how I would make an English translation of a program if I don't have the source code. Now, because I use Resource Hacker to translate, it's only going to affect UI elements that were created at design time in this C++ builder program. Any UI elements that are created with code are not going to be translated. So for example, if I click on batch repacking, you'll notice this pop-up that asks me some kind of question. This is still in Russian, but enough of the program's been translated that you should be able to use it. So let me explain how this works real quick while we hack this pest invasion map. So source map will be the protected version of pest invasion. And I made a new folder called hacked where I'll put all the deprotected versions for testing. And the temp folder you can use as default. The repacker program essentially extracts everything out of the MPQ, corrects the corrupted files, and then repackages it into a new MPQ. And so the temp folder is where it will do all of its extraction. Batch repacking, you'll probably never need to use. That's if you want to deprotect 100 files all at once. You can give it a folder and it'll go through each map one at a time. I would avoid that personally because this tool's not perfect. It requires a little bit of trial and error. It's better to just work on one map at a time. This first option to use xdeprotect, the reason behind that is repacker and xdeprotect both do very similar things, but there are certain protections that either one can handle that the other cannot. And so this coder for repacker, instead of adding everything from deprotect into his program, he just gives you the option to choose which one you want to use. And the xdeprotect program is embedded inside of repacker. It's a good option in some cases where repacker fails, but in some cases we'll need to actually use xdeprotect itself so that we can change some of the config options. Now these two replace W3I and empty DOO. If you mouse over, the tooltip will tell you what specific world editor exception it's designed to fix. So this one's for an out of memory error. This second one is for a unit data missing or invalid error. So if you get those specific errors in map editor, you'll want to check those boxes. If you're not getting those errors, don't check the boxes because you don't want to accidentally modify the map by removing a protection that was not even there in the first place. We want to do the minimal changes possible. Pause before packing, you probably won't need, but that's in case before it repackages, you want to make some manual edit, or if you just want to analyze the files. Delete temp, is going to clear this folder out in between runs. So if you need to troubleshoot something that's not working, you'd want to uncheck that, because extracting all the files takes a while, and that would allow you to analyze them. But also, if you made a manual change, you don't want it to clear out those files and re-extract them every time. You want to keep your changes intact. But in general, I would leave the delete checked and the pause unchecked. External list file is what I mentioned earlier about attaching to Warcraft while you're playing a map for it to analyze which files inside the MPQ are referenced. That's because if the MPQ file has its internal list file corrupted, you won't be able to find all the files otherwise. So by generating a new list file with all of the hidden files restored, you can select the list file so MPQ Repacker knows what file names to look for in the MPQ. A list file is simply just a list of file names, and that's it. In most cases, you should not need to supply a file here, because both Repacker and Deprotect have a deep scan option built in, which does not attach to the Warcraft 3 game engine, so it's not perfect, but it should get most of the files, and it does the same thing that this MPQ recover program does. So most likely it won't be necessary to modify this file. It should be automatic. And then this unpack unknown files, that is useful because if the list file is corrupted, the MPQ extraction can still find all of the files. It simply just doesn't know what their file names are. So as an example, war3map.j is the JAS scripting file. If that file name is missing, when it repacks the MPQ, the new copy of the map will not work. But if you find it within the unknown files and rename it to war3map.j, then when you pack the MPQ, it'll work. We're going to go over this cheat section later on. Under additional settings, compression just makes the final MPQ file smaller. Give the map a name from W3I WTS. I'll explain this in more detail later, but in general, I would leave this unchecked because it typically fails to work, and it's not too hard to just do this deprotection yourself. That's a bug I would like to fix in Repacker once I get it compiling. And then the don't use embedded list file, if you have that unchecked, it will do the deep scan I was talking about before. A lot of maps do have this type of protection, so it's probably good to check it. However, I typically don't mess with these settings at all because Deprotect has those same options, and I think Deprotect does a slightly better job. So I would just leave these both unchecked and keep Deprotect checked in most situations. Next, inside of plugins, again, this is a portion I could not translate. So once we get the code compiling, that can be fixed. But if you scroll through these screenshots, you can see the English translation for each of them if you need it. Plugins are additions to this program done by other coders, which I think is a pretty useful feature. You probably won't need Cheat Injector because this cheat settings does something very similar and it works just fine. CheatPack Detector is if you want to prevent other people from cheating. Patch W3I is the same as this checkbox, and it's also similar to this other setting of give the map a name from W3I. Again, I don't think you'll need any of those because Deprotect can do it in most cases, and if it fails, you could do it by hand pretty easily. Script auto replace allows you to configure a list of search and replace commands for the war3map.j file, which is the JAS code. So this would allow you to embed your own custom code automatically each time you pack the file, if you had like a generic script that you want in all the maps that you deprotect. SLK recover is what I mentioned earlier about the Silk object console, which extracts the unit metadata out of the SLK files and restores them into the world editor files. And this is why I don't think you need Silk object console, because it's built into Repacker. But if for some reason this fails, you could use the other Silk object console. And finally, Spazzler is a protection technique which takes the World of Warcraft MPQ header and puts it on a Warcraft 3 file. And the purpose of that is to confuse the MPQ extraction programs, so they think it's a World of Warcraft map instead of a Warcraft 3 map, so they'll fail to extract it correctly. So the unspazzler just reverses that form of protection. Next, we have rebuild the map. That's what you're going to click once you're all done setting everything up. And then If you want to test it, you would click launch in Warcraft 3, but in my case, this has the wrong file path to Warcraft 3. So when I click it, it errors out. I think it's easy enough just to have this file output directly to your Warcraft folder when you click rebuild the map. Okay, so let's try this with pest invasion. I'm going to uncheck all of the deprotection options and just see if rebuilding the map is enough by itself so that we can open it. Unfortunately, the output is all in Russian, but whenever it stops typing at you, you can assume it's done. If you needed to, you could copy and paste into Google Translate to see what the message is. For some reason, it always thinks the word map is card when it translates from Russian to English. So this says map repacking completed. So it thinks it was successful. Let's see if it really was. I'm going to open up the editor, and first I will open the original pest invasion to make sure that it crashes, and it does with unit data missing or invalid. Then I'll try the hacked version. Okay, same error. So remember, inside a repacker, when I mouse over this empty war3 map units.do, it specifically says it fixes the unit data missing or invalid. So I'm going to check that box and try again. Okay, just finished. Let's try reopening. Nothing. So this is an example where I feel like Deprotect does a better job, and that's why typically I don't use the empty or the replace or these additional settings. I really just like Repacker for these cheats that I'll show you later, as well as these plugins. So instead, I'll just say use Deprotect and try again. Okay, it just says it finished. Let's try to open again. Okay, it opened, no problem at all. One thing to keep in mind about Deprotect, it does have a UI program, this xdiv.2, but if I open it, it's all Russian. This does not actually do anything other than changing the INI file. So you may as well just change the INI yourself. The original INI file is all in Russian, but remember, I have my own copy of Repacker in GitHub where I've translated everything. Inside of it, there's a dependencies folder, which has Deprotect. I have translated the INI file in here. So this is all in English. And in addition, I also have the source code to Deprotect right here, also translated to English. So as we find bugs in Deprotect, we can work around them or fix them. So now that I have pest invasion deprotected, let me just prove that it really works. So obviously you can see on the screen all of the graphics loaded, but if I go to module object editor, you can also see all of the modified units. So anything in pink has been modified. So for example, skull cannon, toy tank, toy transport, these are things specific to the pest invasion game that are not part of the base Warcraft game. Also, if I go to module trigger editor, you'll see there's one trigger called init that was deprotected with Deprotect, and it has all of the JAS code for the entire map. Unfortunately, none of the tools will convert the triggers back to the original GUI triggers. So for example, if I create a new trigger, the user interface is drag and drop. It's all a visual coding language. I think the concept is really cool for new developers, but in the end, you really should learn real coding techniques. And ideally, you don't even want to learn JAS because it's a bad language. You should upgrade to Lua since Warcraft 3 now supports that. So in the case of pest invasion, basically we just had to hit the one checkbox and it worked. Let's move on to the next map. Based on file size, Defiance OpenRPG is the next smallest. So I assume it'll be the next easiest. So in Repacker, I'll pick Defiance. It automatically changed my file name, but kept it in the hacked directory. I'm gonna leave all the settings the same and just hit rebuild and see what happens. Okay, it tells me it's finished. So I'm gonna open the hacked Defiance OpenRPG and see if the world editor can open it. Okay, it opened just fine. Let's double check though. Module object editor. Okay, we've got our pink modified units, so that looks good. Module trigger editor, code in here looks fine. When we get a map unprotected, we want to make sure that it actually works, because there's a possibility that the deprotection actually broke something in the game. So I'm going to take this hacked Defiance OpenRPG and I'm going to put it into my Warcraft maps folder. I made a folder inside of it called _hacking. The underscore is to make it move to the top of the list so I can find it easily in the game. And then I'll just paste the map into here. The reason I like to have a folder called hacking is if I play the game online with other people, I never want to accidentally host one of these hacked maps, because that will allow it to download onto other people's computers. And I don't want to distribute a hacked copy of a game for two reasons. One is map makers protect their maps in order to protect their intellectual property. And if they didn't, you would have a whole bunch of people that put in their own little cheats, and that would ruin the game for everyone else. So if you're going to cheat, I think you should only do it in single player mode or only when you're playing with friends, not online with random strangers. Or if you do it with random strangers, rename the game so it doesn't taint the original, and document all the cheats so everyone knows that they exist, so everyone can use them together. A classic example is one of my favorite games, League of Legends, has themed modes that they run occasionally. One of them is called URF, which stands for Ultra Rapid Fire. It basically removes all the cooldowns in the game, so you just spam your abilities as fast as possible. It's probably the most popular game mode, so there's no reason to not have a version of Dota in Warcraft 3 that unlocks URF mode so everyone can spam their abilities. So as long as the cheats are public and the map is renamed so that it's obvious that it's a different version of the map, I think it's fine. The other thing is, if a map has been discontinued, the original author hasn't touched it in years, it's probably good to host an unprotected copy of the map so other developers can find it and improve on it, because that's what made Warcraft 3 so popular in the beginning, was the custom maps were improved on constantly. But if someone is actively working on their map, you're going to really upset them by deprotecting their map and making it available to everyone. So that's why I keep it in this separate hacking folder so that I never accidentally host it when I'm playing online. What I really wish Blizzard would do instead, so that protecting maps was not necessary, is I wish they would encrypt maps with a thumbprint or signature so that the map files themselves are still readable, but if any modification is made, it no longer matches the signature, so that you can verify which maps are authentic and which ones are not. And then they could open up all the maps to the community and let everyone iterate on them, making improvements, and use a ranking system based on playtime and voting so that the best mods get promoted and the worst mods don't. And then they could host their own database of maps and let gamers search for which map they want to play. That would be very similar to this concept of the lock inside of Google when you're looking at a website. If you click on this lock, it says the certificate is valid. And if you click on the certificate, it has these fingerprints. Unfortunately, I don't think Blizzard will take my advice. Now, I'm going to launch Warcraft and I'll load up that game. Single player, custom, download. Here's that hacking folder at the top, Defiance Open RPG. So I'm going to hit start, and ideally we'd want to run the original version first, learn how it works, so that way when we play the hacked or deprotected version, we can see if it still matches the original. I've never played this game, but just by watching it load, it seems pretty obvious that it is working correctly. So it looks like it wants me to pick a hero from one of these towers. I'll just pick one at random. Wants me to pick some kind of bonus I get. I'll do attack speed, I guess. Here's my character. I can move around. There's townspeople. It seems obvious that this map is working great. And remember, this is the map that I opened in the world editor. So that's proof that it was deprotected correctly. Now, if I played this game for hours and hours, it's possible I would find some random glitch somewhere where the deprotection failed. Maybe if there's custom artwork or sound effects for a boss, when I go fight that boss, it doesn't render correctly because that file was hidden during the extraction. So if you're really wanting to be particular, you may have to make a list of the little bugs you find and fix them by hand. But most likely, the map's going to work great and not have any issues. So let me quit out. And I mentioned earlier I would explain CheatPacks. So let's do that real quick just for fun. Inside of Repacker, in the middle, it has this section called Cheat Settings. On the drop down, there are a list of CheatPacks. And if you find others online, you could add your own because this program is meant to be extensible. But this is a decent list, I think, to start with. So I'll just pick this first one. If I want these cheats to be embedded into the map, I need to click this checkbox, Embed Cheats. And it's designed to only do one cheat pack at a time because they might conflict with each other. If you really wanted more than one cheat pack, you would rebuild the map once with the first cheat pack. Then you would change your source map to the map that you have already hacked. and already has cheats in it, then you would pick a different cheat pack and rebuild again. And in theory, that could give you 2 cheat packs. I wouldn't recommend it because there's a chance the 2 could conflict with each other, but it should be fine. Now, the activator is a message that you have to type in order to activate the cheat pack. So by clicking on the commands, I got the help for arrows pack. Notice it says that the activator is -cheats with a Z. Well, that should be true if I downloaded Arrow's cheat pack online and embedded it myself. But because Repacker is doing the embedding, it's modifying the activator to be MPQ Repacker. So ignore this built-in activator of cheats. It will be incorrect if you're using Repacker. Okay, I will build the map. It says it's completed. I'm gonna open up Warcraft again. Single player, custom games, download, hacking, Defiance RPG, start. Okay, everything's loading the same as before. I'm going to pick my character and my bonus. Now I'm going to type -mpq repacker because that was the activator. It now says cheats enabled. So if I go back to my document, let's find a few hacks we want to try. MH for map hack sounds interesting. That basically will turn off Fog of War. Gold is pretty obvious, not necessarily that exciting. No cooldown sounds pretty cool. Modifying my character's attributes, gaining levels, turning off paving so I can walk through anything. Those all sound interesting, so let's try a few. Enter -mh for map hack. Okay, that one surprisingly seemed to fail. The minimap definitely went visible for a split second and then it turned black again. Let me try again. Yeah, it did that both times. And you can see there's a little knight right here that appears for a split second under my cursor, and then he disappears. So I think this game must have some kind of trigger that every time Fog of War is disabled, that it re-enables it. So unfortunately that particular map hack is not working, but let's try gold 1000. Okay, there's my gold at the top, that worked. I'm gonna try to walk through things. So right here, I can't walk through this fountain, he just walks around it. So I'm gonna type -path off. Now I'll try to walk through. Hey, I'm going right inside the fountain. Okay, path on. Okay, now I can't walk through anymore. Okay, my primary character is strength, and I have 30, and each point in strength gives me hit points, damage, and hit point regeneration. So if I type -str 100, now it's 100 instead of 30, and you'll notice my damage went up as well. So that's the concept of a cheat pack, and if I went back into Repacker and I picked a different cheat pack and opened up the commands, you'll see it has a completely different list. Some of them are going to be similar, gold, lumber, those are fairly standard. But for example, this one will give me a random item. I don't remember that being in the other cheat pack. So it would be really fun to experiment with all the different cheat packs and see what different cheats exist. And what's nice about it is it can be embedded into any map. So the possibilities are kind of endless. I imagine in some maps, they've got a whole bunch of secret items that it would be fun to experiment with this way. Okay, let's quit out of this map and let's move on to the next Deprotection in our list. So we've got Bleach versus One Piece. So I'll pick Bleach, put it to hacked, use X Deprotect. I'm going to stop working with cheats since we've already covered that topic. I'll leave the other settings the same as the previous maps and click rebuild. Now this black window that pops up is for X Deprotect. Repacker opens it, waits for it to finish, and then it takes the results and creates the final file. One issue with that is it does not allow us to modify the XDEP INI file. And for this particular map, it probably would work if I was patient, but it says inlining function and it's going through a long list, and I've been waiting for several minutes already and it's going really slow. I don't want to wait for this, and I personally don't like this inlining function option. I would only turn it on as a last resort if the map can't be deprotected without it. So at this point, I'm going to close the Repacker program and run X Deprotect by hand. So I'll take the Bleach map file and I'll go into my X Deprotect folder and paste it in. And I'll open up the INI file, and the in map file parameter I will change to be Bleach. And for the out file, I'll just call it deprotected.w3x. Now let me go over the different settings that X Deprotect has. First, it has these clean temp directory settings. I prefer on startup to not clean the temporary folder. it's fine for success, but not fine if it errors. What's going to happen is when it runs, it'll make this new folder here called basically like bleach underscore temp, something like that. And that will be its working directory where it extracts all the files from. If it's successful, I'm fine if it deletes it. But if it fails, which is the on error, I want to be able to analyze the files and see what failed. And in addition, I don't want it to clear on startup, because if it failed previously, then if I fix something manually, I want it to start off where it left off rather than starting from the beginning, because if it starts over, my manual fix will be gone. So those are personal preference, but I think they're good defaults. The only downside to not clearing on start is there may be an occasion where you have to delete the folder by hand in case you really want to start from a clean slate. Okay, pause on success and error. That's only really useful if you're running the program by double clicking the exe. I prefer instead to take my folder path, open up a command prompt, paste in cd space, enter. That stands for change directory. And then I prefer to run the exe like this. The reason is if you double click the exe, when it's all finished, the black command prompt box will disappear. So you won't see any log messages. And that's why pause is useful. But typically I'm going to have to make some manual changes multiple times and keep retrying. So I prefer to just keep this prompt open all the time so I can quickly rerun everything. Scan enable is what I talked about earlier with that deep scan, where it's going to search the entire MPQ archive for hidden files. So I would always have that on, and it should do a good job. There will be a lot of unknown files when it's done for more complicated maps, but usually it still works fine without them. In the rare event that the game has some kind of bug because of the missing file, that's when you would use the MPQ editor, which I showed earlier, and have it attached to the game itself and monitor which files are read out of the MPQ. But I think the scan enable should be good enough in most cases. The append list file means this list file.txt next to the xdep.exe. This tells it which files to try to find in the MPQ archive, and anything that's in that list does not need to do the deep scan. So it's good to just leave this append list file on. Halt on unknowns, that would be after it's all done extracting the files. If there's any file that it could not figure out the file name for, it would close the program and not create your new deprotected map file. I don't think you want to turn this on because most of the time those unknown files can just be ignored. The map's still going to work. And it's quite common to have some files that it can't figure out the correct name for them. Okay, these next set of options. Delete ALS, that's the attribute list file and signature file. For example, the list file inside the MPQ is usually corrupted, and that's what causes all the unknown files. So if you delete the built-in list file, then it will get replaced with a new one, which is not corrupted and which has the correct list of files. So generally you want to have this one turned on. If you're wanting to be extra careful, you could kind of turn off all the settings to start with, try to unprotect, and if it fails, turn on one setting at a time just to kind of get the minimum number of patches necessary. But in general, I would have a set of default options that work for most maps and only modify the settings that fail. Delete ALS, I would just keep on all the time. The patch W3I, I would also just keep on all the time. This is the info file, and that's what stores the map's name, as well as the splash art that shows during the game loading screen. So it's common for that to be corrupted, so turning this on is beneficial. In the rare event that this breaks something or makes it worse, instead you would want to just copy the W3I from a blank map and paste it in. That would remove any custom splash art, but then you could just run the real map to see what the splash art looks like and then recreate it from scratch in the world editor if you needed to. And this particular setting, it will actually try to detect if the W3I is corrupted, so it won't modify it if it's fine. This build IMP is very important. There is something called an import list in the war3map.imp file. If you go into the world editor and go to module asset manager, this is essentially the import list. And this is where you would add custom models and custom sound effects. If there is any file in the MPQ that does not belong in the base map files and is not in this import list, then when you hit save in world editor, it will delete it because it tries to clean up files that don't belong. So if you have custom artwork for a unit, it can be in the MPQ and work fine in the game, and even open fine in the world editor the first time. But as soon as you hit save, if it's not in this import list, it will delete it from the map. So then the next time you run it, that artwork or sound effect will be gone. So it's common for that import list to be corrupted, and you need this setting turned on. This build dummy do, I would leave on. In most cases, this should not be necessary because there's a separate do setting at the bottom called build_do. The bottom one is a bit more advanced and works better. So I would turn on both because this top one will only execute if the bottom one fails. The do file stands for doodads. There's actually two files. One is war3map units.do and the other is war3map.do. Doodads are essentially objects that have been placed onto your map. If these files are not rebuilt, then when you open in the map editor, your units or trees that appear on startup will be missing. Next is this recover script. The WTG and WCT files are for triggers, basically JavaScript. And remember, the world editor has a visual format for the script. So the real file that matters in the game is war3map.j, but the WTG and WCT files allow you to visualize the triggers in the coding tool inside of world editor. So commonly these files are deleted and only the war3map.j file is kept. So recover script will analyze the war3map.j and try to recreate these two files. Now, it will never get them intact to the original, so you won't be able to use the visual coding tool in the map editor, but you'll just have one single trigger in the coding tool that's not visual that just has all of the text from war3map.j. So if you don't have this setting turned on, then either the world editor won't be able to open the map at all, or it will open, but as soon as you try to save, all of your JAS code will be deleted because it will take the corrupt visual triggers, compile them into a JAS file, and replace your war3map.j. So you need this so that your JAS doesn't get recorrupted after you save in the map editor. Finally, the build w3x is what actually creates the final map file when it's done. So if you had that turned off, the temp directory would have all the files after they've been extracted and corrected, but it would not actually create the final map file. And you'd only have that turned off if you wanted to do manual edits first before creating the map file, but then you would have to create the map file yourself. Rename reserved functions. The world editor has specific reserved function names that it needs. And if you make a function with one of those names, the world editor will crash. This will search for any of those functions and rename them. I would recommend always having this on. Inline functions, I would recommend having this turned off. The reason is it is very, very slow. And basically it's taking code like this. This is just pseudocode, but where that function is called, it just takes the original code and replaces it and then comments out the original. So it's just simplifying your code. Now, it only does that if the function is not used in multiple places, because if it's used in multiple places, you don't want it to make your code really long, especially if this function is more complicated. So this is just really slow, but most importantly, it's pretty rare for a map to need this. So I would only turn it on if the deprotection fails and you're able to narrow it down and determine that this particular feature will fix it. Rename globals, I would turn on. It's not necessary, but it just makes your code easier to read. So an obfuscated variable name is just like random variable names. So normally you'd have something like this to be a region variable, but instead it would just scramble it with random letters. That's going to make the code harder to read and understand. So rename globals will correct that so that it's easier to understand. Now, it's still not going to be a user-friendly name. So for example, a name like region hero spawn is really nice because you know exactly what the programmer's intention was for that variable. Whereas instead, something like region 1, not super useful, but at least you know it's a region and not an ability or something else. So rename globals doesn't really fix protection generally, but it just makes the code easier to read. And that's actually the same purpose of this indent script as well, is readability. By default, the code in war3map.j has no tabs, so an if statement is really hard to follow without tabs, especially if there's multiple nested if statements. So I think it's fine if you want to do the indent script, but I personally have a better option. So for example, here's the war3map.j that came in the base map. If I select everything and hold Shift Tab, that will just remove all tabs. So you'll see, for example, here the tabs are missing here on this globals section and also on this function section. Well, this program, Visual Studio Code, it has an extension. You'll notice on the bottom right corner here, it says JAS. If you go into extensions here and search for JAS and install it, then it can auto format your code. It also gives this highlighting, so the color coding makes it easier to read as well. But if I just right click and say format document, it re-adds the tabs. Personally, I would turn indent script off and I would use the VS Code one instead, but it's up to you. Okay, parse W3 data. What this does is inside of every map, there's generally a main function and a config function. These possibly could be renamed to something else, but this has some basic setup. For example, it has the map's name, and up here it has like the camera bounds. If the W3I file, which is the info file, has been corrupted, then the world editor doesn't know the name of the map and it will crash. But it is still in code because otherwise the game would crash. Parse W3 data simply grabs that data out of the JAS script. However, it does not actually do anything with it. This setting just tells it whether it should try to understand that data out of the JAS. So I don't really know why it's its own setting. The only setting that depends on it is this build do. The build do will figure out the starting points of each player, which comes from this define start location, and it will put that into the W3I file, because if that portion of the file has been corrupted, the world editor won't open, even though the game works fine. I would recommend having build do turned on, and for that to work, you also have to have the parse W3 data turned on. That's all the settings that X Deprotection has. There are a few types of protection that it does not handle, but they're more rare, and I have extracted the source code out of this X Deprotection program. So if we find a protection that fails, we can improve this program. But I would recommend leaving everything on except the inline functions and the halt unknowns and the clean temp on start and error. Everything else I would leave on. So when we ran the repacker before, X Deprotection didn't crash, but it was so slow on the inlining of functions that I didn't want to wait. Okay, now I'm going to run X Deprotection. Now this is kind of odd. It says it can't open war3map.w3i, but I know when I ran it with repacker the first time, it was still using X Deprotection, and it did not have this issue because it got down to the inlining of functions. And I only killed it because I didn't want to be patient and wait for it. Let's see what we can do to work around this issue. I have a couple of options. First, I could open up MPQ Master and open the Bleach one piece. Unfortunately, you'll notice MPQ Master just crashed, so it can't open the Bleach file either. So it's weird that X Deprotection and MPQ Master fail, yet repacker works fine. And the reason for that is you'll notice MPQ Master uses a DLL called MPQ lib. That's how it extracts the files inside of the MPQ archive. But X Deprotection instead uses SFMPQ. So they're different tools. And so most likely repacker uses its own technique. So we could instead switch to MPQ editor that I mentioned I don't like quite as much as MPQ Master, but sometimes you have to just use multiple tools until one of them works. And so you'll notice that this one does have files in here. So that's one option, but I think I prefer to open it up in repacker instead, since it was already working. And I'll do Bleach again, and I'll keep the X Deprotection on, which I know is going to take forever, but I'll cancel it partway through. And I'll say rebuild map. So as soon as X Deprotection starts up, I'm going to pause it. If I just highlight something with my mouse, it makes the program pause. You'll see my temp folder here is app data local temp MPQ repacker temp. So here you can see all of the files that were exported. We want to essentially turn off the setting for inlining. The other option is I could uncheck this pack with X Deprotection, let repacker hack the map once, then change my source map to that hacked version, and then run it through X Deprotection a second time, and then hopefully that would get rid of the W3I issue. The reason for that is because X Deprotection has better deprotections, and so I really do want to run it through X Deprotection, but since it's crashing, I need to fix the crash first. But I think I'll just take all of these files that were extracted out, and I'll just copy them into my X Deprotection directory, and let it go from there. So here's my xdprotect folder. Inside of temp files, it was only able to extract one file before it gave up. So I'm just going to delete it, and then I'll copy all the files from repacker into the temp folder of xdprotect. So essentially I have two versions of Deprotect running. One is the one that repacker started for me, and the other is the one that I'm running by hand. And the only difference is the one I'm doing by hand, I have the inline functions turned off so that I don't have to wait forever. And in case you were curious how repacker is able to run xdprotect, in the toolbar here you'll see the path is local temp xdep. So the place I just copied from was local temp mpq repacker, and this was all the files. But the xdep folder has the xdprotect and all the files, as well as the ini. The issue here is I know that repacker, as soon as xdep is finished, it will delete everything in here. So that's why I kind of needed to pause the program so I could grab all the files. So now that I have my files extracted from the MPQ, I'm going to cancel this xdprotect, which unfreezes repacker, and I don't need it anymore, so I'll just hit the X on it. And then I've copied all the files into my own instance of xdprotect, where I've modified the ini to not inline functions. So now if I try running it, it should not give me this error about War3 map W3I missing. Okay, looks like it's working, and hopefully it should be fairly quick because the inlining is not happening this time. So it looks like it's finished. It always says that there's errors. Those can just be ignored. I think it's just a bug in Deprotect that it tries to delete this folder, but the folder's not empty because I told it don't clear when you're finished in case I want to make some modifications and try again. So you can just ignore those errors. So here's my deprotected file. Let's see if it opens in map editor. So I'll move it to my hacked folder and I'll call it bleach deprotected. File open map, hacked, bleach deprotected. Okay, it seems like it opened. So that's good news. Let's go to module object editor. Okay, all the units that have been modified are in pink. And module trigger editor, here's all my script code. So it looks like it deprotected. Since I still have 4 more maps to deprotect, I'm not going to go to the effort of running the map and testing it. I'm just going to assume that if the map editor opens, it's been successfully deprotected unless there's something obviously wrong. So let's move on to Lordaeron. File, close map. Now this time I'm not going to start with repacker, I'll just start with xdprotect. So I will delete the bleach files that I was working on, and I'll copy in Lordaeron. And the reason I'm starting with xdprotect is just like in the last instance where xdprotect needed custom modifications to the ini file, which repacker does not allow. I'm just assuming that's going to be the case for some of these more complicated maps, so I'm just skipping repacker altogether. You should probably try it with repacker first, but I'm skipping it this time. Okay, open the ini, change the in-map file to Lordaeron, leave the out as deprotected, leave all the settings how they were the last time, which is basically everything enabled except for inline functions. Save it, and we'll run xdep. Okay, you'll notice here, I'm going to pause it for a second. It's extracting a bunch of unknowns, and we've discussed that hopefully those are safe to ignore, and if they're not, we could use MPQ editor attached to Warcraft while it's running, and maybe you could find more of the correct names to add to the list file so they can extract correctly. But most of the unknowns extracted okay, even though it doesn't know the proper name for them, but some of them say error. That's slightly concerning, but again, we'll just ignore it and only worry about it if the unprotected map has issues when we actually try to play it or edit it. So I'll continue. Another thing to keep in mind is there are a lot of files being extracted right now. There is a bug in xdprotect, which I'll show in a minute how to fix, but if there are too many files, it will fail to recreate the new archive, and repacker has the same exact issue. So the fix for both will be the same. Okay, after what seemed like forever, it finally finished, and the last few messages showed up really quickly and then disappeared. I think there was an error, but it was so fast it wasn't captured on the screen. So let me test opening it with the map editor, and then I'll show you how to debug that error if there was one. So I'll take deprotected and put it in my hacked folder and try to open it with map editor. And instantly you see level info data missing or invalid. that error generally means that the MPQ archive is actually completely corrupted and no program can open it. So I'll prove that if I were to use the MPQ master or any other MPQ editor for that matter and do open. If I try to open that file, at the bottom it says error opening archive. The file is completely corrupt. Now let me show you how that happened. If I rerun xdprotect and I use the greater than sign and make up a file name like log.txt, it will redirect all the output to that file. Now it should be very quick the second time around because it doesn't need to extract all the files like it did the first time. That's the beauty of not clearing the temp directory each time. And it looks like it's finished, but it's waiting for me to hit the enter key. I just don't see that on the screen because it's in the log file. So I'll hit enter and it's done. So if I open this log file and scroll through it, you'll notice it says okay at the end of every file as it's adding it, until partway down, it starts saying error on every single one. And it's a bit odd. It seems like the command line console truncates at a certain number of characters, so some of them don't show the full error. But everything before was successful and everything afterwards was unsuccessful. If I were to count how many succeeded, so I'll just cut these, delete everything else and paste it. The line number is 1023. So that's how many succeeded. Now, next to xdprotect, there is a file called sfmpq. If I run that by itself, sfmpq, it gives me some help for how that program works. And I can assume it's how xdprotect creates the MPQ archive. Notice there's an option of -m, which is the maximum number of files in the archive, which defaults to 1024. And that's exactly the number of files that succeeded before it started failing. So I don't know why this setting exists. I'm guessing the MPQ can be optimized if it knows ahead of time that it has a small number of files, or maybe there's something in the header metadata when the MPQ is first created that takes up a certain amount of space, for example, with the list file, and it needs to allocate extra space in advance if there's going to be more than 1,000 files, something like that, because it specifically says it only matters when it creates a new archive. So this, in a way, is kind of a bug, or at least not a user-friendly feature of MPQ, because it seems like if it tries to add files to an archive that's full, it could just make a new archive that supports twice as many files and move all the files to the new archive. But regardless, we're not going to rebuild the MPQ program. We're just going to work around its limitations. So obviously this -m is not being sent when xdprotect calls it. So the problem here is I don't know the exact command that xdprotect is using to add all these files to the MPQ. And I don't know if it does any extra manipulation of the MPQ after the fact. So even though I could call it from the command line directly with a different -m parameter, I'd be missing whatever else xdprotect is doing. So first we need to extract the source code out of xdprotect so we can understand how it works and make sure we do this properly. And before I forget, I'm just going to right click on this files and do properties, because Windows will count for me how many files there are. It shows that there are 3,594. So when I do the -m command, I'm going to want to make sure I give it space for at least 4,000 files, so there's room to grow. Typically, I'd say maybe just round it to the nearest and then double it. So maybe I'll just do 8,000 to be safe. So how would I extract the code out of xdprotect? There's a few things I could do. First, I want to get metadata about the exe so that I know which programming language it was compiled with. So first I'm going to open the same resource hacker that we used before, and I'll open up xdprotect, and I'm just going to skim over some of the resources that are in here to see if there's anything promising. So something interesting I noticed off the bat is under manifest, it has kind of this metadata from when it was compiled, and it says Perl for the description and Perl for this name right here. That strikes me as odd because Perl, it's a scripting language. However, everything else in here looks more to me like a program compiled with Visual Studio, probably like Visual C++ or something. So that's something that strikes me as interesting off the bat. If I wanted to know how it was compiled, there is a program called PEID, which you could Google and download. And I'll just open xdprotect in here. And it tells me Visual C++ 6. So now that I know what it was compiled with, I would want to Google for a Microsoft Visual C++ 6 decompiler. And you want to be very specific to the exact compiler you're using, because Borland C++ or this C++ builder that Rad Studio uses, they're all completely different compilers, even though they're C++. And so the decompiler needs to be specific. Now, if it's an obscure compiler, it's likely that there's not a decompiler for it, or at least not a good one. And even if there's a decompiler, C++ compiles down to assembly. It's almost sometimes easier to read the disassembly than it is to try to read the decompiled C++. But right now I'm just gathering clues. So my favorite tool for disassembly is IDA. So let's open that. If I open up IDA freeware and I say new and pick my program, XDEP, I'll just leave the defaults and hit OK. Now the first thing that pops up, normally I just ignore, but sometimes it's good to read error messages or warnings just in case they give you clues about something. So it's saying that it can't find the symbol file, which is a PDB file. That's completely normal when you're decompiling a commercial software or software that you downloaded online, because PDB files are debugging information and most people don't distribute that debugging information unless it's an open source program. So normally I would just ignore this, but something interesting. Again, we see Perl, which, like I said before, is a scripting language. So the reason that's curious to me is scripting languages are usually not compiled, but an exe is compiled, and this particular case was compiled with C++. So C++ and Perl are completely different languages. So I'm wondering, could the C++ maybe just be a wrapper around the Perl? And the benefit to that is, since the Perl's probably not compiled, I can possibly extract the original source code with no modifications and even having the comments and everything, which would be very nice for being able to modify and edit this code. So I'm going to ignore this error. Now we see the assembly code here. If I wanted to disassemble it back to C++, I would go to View, Open Subviews, Generate Pseudocode. And this gives me something C++-like, and I could skim over it and I could try to figure out what it's doing. But first, let me look for a few more clues. So one view I think is very useful is this strings view. The purpose of the strings view is to read through the entire executable, specifically in its data section where variables are stored, and look for anything that could be interpreted as ASCII text. And that's because if your program has any type of user interface, those messages have to be in the code so that they can be rendered to the screen. So if you find an error message while you're running the program, you could search for that error message in the strings view, and that might give you a starting point to tell you where in the code or the disassembly that specific string is output to the screen. But in addition, you can see here a lot of these strings look like function names, and normal functions, once they're compiled down, do not have their name anymore because they are just converted to memory addresses. But any external functions that have to execute at the operating system level need the actual function name to remain intact. So again, you could use this to find where those operating system calls are made. But I'm just going to scroll through here and see if I find anything interesting that gives me any clues. So right off the bat, I see a whole bunch of things that say Perl. Again, I'm thinking this is not really a C++ program. This is probably just a wrapper around a Perl script. So I have kind of two approaches I could use to try to figure that out. First of all, this paperl.c, I feel like that's kind of the name of the wrapper. The -e looks to me like maybe it's going to execute something. And this begin kind of looks to me like it could be the start of a Perl script, as well as you got the script name here. So if I wanted to really disassemble this and debug it, I would double click on the .data. It would take me to the disassembly. Then I would right click on the data and say list cross references. And that would show me where in the code that piece of data is referenced. And then I could add a breakpoint and then I could step through it as it's executing. But I think there might be an easier technique. So if I just run the program, somewhere in its memory, it has to have the Perl script while it's executing. So a program has a whole lot of memory. So if I just dump the memory, it might not be obvious where the Perl script in that memory is. But if I just look for one of these strings, I might be able to find it really easily. Now, unfortunately, I did not see it anywhere in the strings tab. And that's probably because the Perl script could be located in an obscure place. And in fact, maybe I could search inside a resource hacker here for this message, this like X deprotect. But I don't know if that will be the case because an executable, if it has an embedded file, it may be compressed and in a format that this strings tab or the resource hacker program can't necessarily extract it. But I know when it's running in memory, it has to be the pure script, decompressed, etc. So that's what I want to try. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run x deprotect. And I'm going to highlight the screen like I did earlier just to pause the script while it's running because I don't want it to finish executing because I want to analyze this memory. And then I'm going to open up the task manager. You can get that from the start menu by typing task manager, or I just hit Control-Shift-Escape. And then I'm going to click on details and I'm going to look for XDEP. Here it is. I'm going to right click on it and say create dump file. That will take all of its current memory that's in RAM and output it to a file. And it tells me the location is going to be in this temp folder. So I clicked the open file location from that dialog, and here is the xdep.dmp. I'm just going to open this, and because it's memory, I expect the majority of it to be binary ones and zeros that are not useful. But the part that's the Perl script, I'm hoping will just be user readable ASCII text. Okay, so it says it's probably not a text file. Do you want to open anyways? And I'm saying yes. And I'll just use the built-in text editor. Okay, so we got an ugly mess here, but that's okay. I could have also used my hex editor. Now in here, I'm going to search for one of these messages that's on the screen, and I'll search for xdep.ini. Okay, look at this. This is beautiful. So you could see at the top, it's calling execute line 1 with this Perl script name, a bunch of crazy characters, but then the script starts right here with this is a Perl script, all of the code until at the end of the script, we get a bunch of crazy characters again. So I should just be able to highlight the whole thing and copy it out. So now I have it in this xdep.pl file right here. Now we can read the code, see how Deprotector works, and back to fixing the Lordaeron map. Luckily, no one else should ever have to extract the Perl script again because I've already done it. I just wanted to show you how it's possible. So we found that with Lordaeron, it has more than 1,000 files, and sfmpq needs the -m command to be given so that it preps the archive for a large number of files. But obviously, this Perl script is not doing that. So if I go into the code and search for sfmpq, I can see where the program is used. And I'm not going to read or explain any of the code unless it's critical to what we're actually solving because the code's long and complicated. So we can see right here, it's building the W3X file because it's an if statement based on the ini having that option enabled. And when it calls sfmpq with the add command, it does not have a -m. And the add command, it's actually calling it with the list file. So inside of xdprotect, we see there's a temp folder, and that has 2 list files. So now I know what it's doing. I just need to go up into the Lordaeron temp folder. And from here, I should be able to execute this sfmpq command. But next I need to know, what does it do after the fact? Is there anything important I'm going to miss by doing it by hand? Since I can't actually fix this Perl script, I want to just add -m 8000 or some large number so that it preps the archive with enough files. But then I have to figure out how to compile the Perl script. And I either have to download the Perl interpreter, or I have to find the C++ wrapper that allows executing Perl from an exe. I don't want to deal with that right now. I'll do that in the future. So instead, I'll just run these commands by hand. So after it calls sfmpq, I can see here that it reads a header file and it grabs 512 characters from one, and then it writes those same 512 characters to the other. And then afterwards, it closes the MPQ file and it says that the map has been created. So because the map's been created at this point, I think it's done. So the only thing I need to be careful of is to make sure I do this 512 character replacement after I add the list files. So first I'm going to delete the out MPQ because that's what I'm going to create. Then I'm going to go up one more folder into the files folder. The reason is if I open up files.txt, it has all these file names, but these files are not in the same directory. They're up one level. So I think if I run the command from the temp directory, it will fail. So from the files folder, I'm going to go down 2 levels so that I can find sfmpq. And if you hit the tab key, it will autocomplete. So it did DLL first, but I want the exe, so I'll hit tab one more time. Then I'm going to do the a command for add. I'll go down 1 level and choose my files.txt. And then I'll specify ./out.mpq as my output. But this is the command that Perl was doing. I need to add the -m, and I'll just say 8,000 to make it plenty large, since this one has like 3,500 files. I'll hit enter, and it failed because I think I got a parameter in the wrong order. So let me double check the Perl script. Okay, it wants the MPQ file first and the list file second. My mistake. So I'll remove out.mpq and put it before the files.txt. Okay, that's working great. Now, remember, this is what we output to the log.txt earlier, and after about 1,000 of OKs, it started saying error on everything. So if this gets all the way to the bottom, oh, it did, and nothing said error, everything says okay, so I think we're good. Now, I would want to also do this off of this list file.txt. In this case, it's empty, so it won't matter, but in the event that the list file also had extra files, we would want to include those as well. So I'll just hit the up key to retype my previous command, and then I'll just change this to list file.txt and hit enter. It won't do anything because that file's empty, but I would need that for any future maps in case both of those files have something. So this out MPQ is almost our deprotected map, but there's one issue, and that is we need to copy those 512 bytes. So if I take the original Lordaeron and get its 512 bytes, and then I get this out MPQ with the hex editor, then I should be able to see what these 512 bytes are that it's talking about. So the Lordaeron, at the very front, it says MPQ, and the new out MPQ, if I drag that in, it also says MPQ. Now, I'm gonna not follow the Perl script's advice in copying these 512, because this is actually one form of deprotection that XDEP does incorrectly for this particular map, but instead I'll show you why and the proper way to fix it. So if I were to highlight 512 bytes, I would do edit block nchars and type the number 512 and hit OK. So you'll see what's in red. That is the 512 bytes that it wants to copy. And that is normally correct, but this Lordaeron map has an extra form of deprotection that XDeprotect does not recognize. So let me open under the original any of these, the Pest Invasion, Defiance, or Bleach, in a hex editor. So if I take Pest Invasion, you'll see that if I do the same thing, edit block nchars 512 and hit OK, it's highlighting from this HM3W all the way to this character, and immediately afterwards is MPQ. Well, Lordaeron starts with MPQ, so Lordaeron's actually missing this entire header. That header is similar to the W3I file. It's just informational, and it tells World Editor about the map, like its map name, for example. So if I copy these 512 bytes from Lordaeron into out MPQ, which is my deprotected map, it's actually the wrong 512 bytes, and it'll actually mess up the archive, because what I actually need is something like this HM3W header. And I could prove that by first opening this out MPQ with MPQ master to show that it actually does open and all the files are here. And once I replace those 512 and reopen it, MPQ master would fail and say that the archive was corrupted. But I'm not going to bother with that. Just trust me. And also, if I went to open the out MPQ, it would also fail because it's missing those 512 bytes from the header. So what I'm going to do is take these 512 bytes from Pest Invasion, paste them into Lordaeron. Now, that will mess up some of the metadata about the map. For example, it'll have the wrong file name. So I'll also just change it to what I want. So for example, I'll do edit block nchars 512. Then I'll do edit clipboard copy. So now I have Pest Invasion in my clipboard. Then I'll go to out, and instead of highlighting these 512 and pasting, which I would do from clipboard paste, I'm going to unhighlight because I don't want to replace these 512 that start with MPQ because that would actually corrupt the archive. Those bytes need to stay the same. I just want to insert it at the front. So I'll say edit block unmark so that nothing's highlighted. Then I'll say edit clipboard paste. So now I have the MPQ, which I should have, and I have the HM3W. And instead of calling it Pest Invasion, I'll type Lordaeron instead. Now you want to be really careful if you're editing directly in the hex editor, because if you hit a delete key, it will actually remove the entire byte and shift everything over. And binary files are very susceptible to errors if any bytes change. So for example, there's a specific amount of space allocated for saving a file name. All I want to do is just use the space key to clear them out. And I also want to be careful not to go too far, because that XL and this square, they are unrelated to the map name. And so if I spaced them out, it would actually break it. And the way you can tell is most strings are null terminated. What that means is where I have the word Lordaeron, it's the binary is 4C, 6F, 72. Those are ASCII codes. Once I get to spaces, it's all 20. The ASCII code for space is 20. The very end of the string ends with 00. That is a null character. That means it's the end of the string. So 78 and 4C are for something completely unrelated. So I don't want to modify those because it could break the map. So obviously this header is not the correct header for Lordaeron. So something in world editor might be slightly off. If I went into the map info in the world editor, I might be able to figure out what it is and fix it. But it's going to be as close as I can get. So I'm going to do file save as and go to my hacked folder and call it Lordaeron. Then I can close my hex editor. So this map should be deprotected now. So from my world editor, I'm going to say open Lordaeron. And let's hope it opens. Does seem like maybe it's freezing at loading custom object data. So there may be one additional type of hack we need to do. So I'm going to kill the world editor and I'm going to look at my base map files and I'm going to see what might be incorrect or missing in comparison with the Lordaeron temp. So not all of these files are 100% required. For example, the conversation JSON, I rarely see that in files, but I'll search for war3 map dot. So I have the do file, I have the J file, I have the MMP, SHD, the W3C appears to be missing, so I should keep a note of that. The W3E is there, the W3I is there, W3R, CT, PM, TG, TS, and the BLP, and the units.do. So the only one that was missing was the W3C. So I should look at that. And then in addition, I should kind of do a diff between the files to see if any of them are possibly corrupted in some way. So I'm going to look at the file format website again and see what the W3C is for. It says it's the camera file. I don't know if that's necessary or not. So from this camera file from the base map files, which I know is good, I'm going to open it up in Notepad and it looks like it's just blank. So I think it's probably fine to ignore. It wouldn't hurt if I just pasted it in here, but I have a suspicion something else in here is corrupted. So something odd though is when I open the map, Lordaeron, normally if you watch its progress, you can see it get froze on a very specific thing that makes it obvious what's broken. So for example, it's specifically freezing at loading units. So as you deprotect maps more often, you'll come to find certain patterns to always look for. For example, I also mentioned earlier that the regions file is commonly corrupted. So we should just look for that now, just in case that's an issue. Unfortunately, it's not something that xdeprotect or MPQ repacker solve automatically for you. But usually when that happens, this loading screen would freeze loading regions and it'd have a really large number. And in this case, it's stuck on units. So I don't suspect that's the issue, but once you're out of ideas, you just want to check every protection method you can think of. So I'm going to kill world editor again. And then inside of our Lordaeron files, let's just look at this W3R in the hex editor to see if there's anything odd going on. Okay, so I don't know if you see what I'm seeing, but there's obviously something wrong. So as we mentioned before, these last 4 bytes say the number of, I can't stop laughing. It shows the number of regions that are supposed to be in the file. Well, immediately after the number ends, there are no regions. So obviously they should be all zeros. But in my case, I did a really big number by doing FF, 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 because that's the highest value in hexadecimal. Well, this person chose very specific letters in the ASCII table that I cannot repeat on YouTube or I'll get in trouble. But they are also large numbers when considered as binary. So that would cause it to crash reading regions. So I'm just gonna erase the swear word and change it to zeros to say that there are no regions. In your case, if you actually saw like 20 regions here, you'd need to count them out and make sure you put in the number 20 so that it actually does read the regions that are there. Okay, I'm gonna save this file and then I need to repack this MPQ file, which is a little bit annoying, because then I've got to recopy these 512 bytes again. So luckily I still have my command window open, so I can just hit the up arrow and rerun it. And I'm not going to bother to run it a second time with the list file since I already know that that's empty. So now that it's finished with the files.txt, I will open the out MPQ in a hex editor. And then I will grab the pest invasion 512 bytes and copy them. And I'm going to be lazy. When I paste here, I'm not going to bother to change it from pest invasion back to Lordaeron. And also there is a little bit of risk. If you change it incorrectly, you might break something. So it's almost better to leave it and then fix it in the world editor instead. Okay, I'll save this as Lordaeron, replace yes, open the editor and open Lordaeron. Fingers crossed that it does not crash this time. Okay, it got past the custom object data into doodads. Looking good so far. This must be a pretty big map. And that's kind of why I started from the smallest maps first, because once we get into like Twilight's Eve, which is pretty big, it's going to take a long time to load in the world editor. It does seem like maybe it's frozen again, so I may need to fix something with the doodads as well. So let's see if we can find the doodads. I'm going to kill world editor again, and I thought that the doodad file was here in both cases. Yeah. They're both here, but maybe one of them has a protection or corruption on it. So this is kind of a last resort thing, is where I have the base map files, I've got a default file that I know is not corrupted that I can replace if I need to. The problem is that's also going to delete part of the map. So if you have to grab a base map file to paste it in, you should do it just as a troubleshooting mechanic to figure out which file is corrupted. So I would just do them one at a time, paste in just the doodads and see if that fixes it, and then paste in just the JAS and see if that fixes it, and narrow it down to only the files that are actually corrupted. Then once you find out what's corrupted, do a diff in a hex editor and see if you can figure out what weird technique they did to corrupt that file. So in my case, I'm not going to do it one file at a time because I specifically saw world editor was freezing when it got to doodads. So it's going to be one of these two files. So let's just try that and see if it fixes it. So I'm going to go into MPQ master and I will open my hacked copy of Lordaeron. And something nice about MPQ master compared to MPQ editor is it does not lock the file. So I can go into my base map files and right click and add the war3 map.do, and it's instantly saved. I don't have to hit file save. I don't have to hit file close. The file does not stay locked, so I can keep it here and keep troubleshooting if needed. But I can go ahead and open the world editor and try to open Lordaeron and see if that fixes it. Whereas if I was doing that with MPQ editor, it would lock the file. So world editor would not even be able to open the file at all until I closed MPQ editor. So let's hope this gets further this time. It kind of feels frozen, and I remember it froze on this screen before, except I think it froze loading doodads the last time. One thing I'm noticing is I'm like almost out of memory. I've got that 27 gigs of memory being used by Warcraft. So I really doubt that's intentional. There's got to be another corrupt file. So I'm going to kill Warcraft again, and I'm going to add in the other do file, which was war3 map units.do. And I'll try one more time. Okay, that was awesome. So this time it finally loaded. So I don't know for sure if it was the units.do or the regular .do that was causing the problem, but it was one of the two. We technically do have the map deprotected. I strongly suspect if I were to run this in game, it would be broken because I had to replace both of the do files. And in fact, if you were to scroll around on the map, you'll notice there are no trees anywhere and there are no buildings anywhere. However, generally, those things are also in the script. They just are in the do file to make the world editor able to load them visually without running the JAS. So there's a chance the game actually would still work. It's a little iffy. But let's just check here. Module object editor. Okay, I've got all my modified units that are pink. Let's check the trigger editor. Okay, I've got all my code. So I'm going to say that that's been deprotected, although it's not 100%. Okay, now let's start working on the Dota All-Stars map. Same process as before. I'm going to the X deprotect folder. I'll delete the Lordaeron files, and I'll open the ini file. For the in-map, I'll use Dota All-Stars, and I'll copy the Dota file into the X deprotect folder. And I'll just leave all the settings the same as what we use with Lordaeron, and I'll come back to the command prompt and try to run xdprotect. Okay, it seems to be extracting just fine. And obviously we could have tried MPQ repacker, but I suspect since these are large map files, I'm going to come across the same 1000 file limit that I'll need to override since we have not fixed the Perl script inside of Deprotect. Looks like it finally finished extracting. It did have 591 unknown files, so that's always a little bit concerning, especially when it's a large number. But as we've discussed in the past, most likely it'll be okay. Now it's adding all the files, and if you watch closely, you can see the word error that keeps popping up here. So that's obviously because it has more than 1000 files. So I'm certain if I try to open the MPQ file, it's probably corrupted. So I'm just going to delete the MPQ, and from the command line, I will run sfmpq manually with the -m8000 command to make sure we have room for all of the files. Just to be safe, first I'll right click on files and do properties and let Windows give me a count of the files. So there are 4000. So if I do 8000, I should be fine. And you'll notice that both files and the list file have data inside them. You do need to run sfmpq with both. Otherwise there will be files missing in your final map. So I'll go into the Dota temp folder and then into the files folder. And then I'm just hitting the up arrow to retype the command that I had previously. So I'll run it with the -m8000 against files.txt. And after it finishes, I'll do it again with the list file.txt. Okay, just finished. Now I'll do list file. Now it's finished. So remember from the Perl script, it had to copy the 512 bytes from the header. So we'll need to do that as well. So I'm going to open my hex editor and load the out.mpq. And you'll notice it does not have the header yet. So I'll open a second hex editor and load the original Dota All-Stars into it. Now, luckily, this one does have the 512 byte header, the HM3 at the top, whereas the Lordaeron did not. So instead of copying it from Pest Invasion like we did for Lordaeron, we'll copy it from the original Dota All-Stars. So I'll say edit block nchars 512. Make sure I'm on decimal instead of hexadecimal and hit OK. Edit clipboard copy. Then I'll switch back to the out MPQ and edit clipboard paste. Then file save as. I'll go into my hacked folder and call it Dota deprotected.w3x. Okay, let's see if we can open this in the map editor. File open map, hacked folder, Dota deprotected. Okay. Okay, surprisingly, it loaded just fine immediately. So we didn't have to do anything extra besides fixing that 1000 maximum file issue with sfmpq. But let's double check that everything really loaded correctly. So if I go to module trigger editor, I see all the code. That looks good. If I go to module object editor, you'll notice that none of the units look custom. There's no pink anywhere. So this is an example where the unit data has been corrupted, and luckily there is a backup in the SLK files that we could extract out and convert to the world editor format to fix this. And if we open MPQ Repacker, previously it had a plugin in here called SLK Recover, I think. Let me go back to my GitHub so I can see the screenshots. Yes, right here on the plugin screenshots, we see there should be an SLK Recover. It's odd that it's missing all of a sudden, but something I noticed was on my notification bar, it popped up a virus threat when I opened MPQ Recover, and we previously whitelisted our folder so that it would not do a virus check on MPQ Repacker. So it surprised me that it still was scanning. So let's look at that. If I click on this and then do protection history and look at the quarantined threat, it says it's inside of app data roaming MPQ Repacker plugins SLK Recover. So even though I whitelisted my temp folder where MPQ Packer is installed, MPQ Repacker is using this app data folder as well. So I need to whitelist that also. So I'm going to copy this folder and click on virus and threat protection, then manage settings, scroll down to exclusions, add an exclusion folder and paste it in. And we still don't see it. And that's probably because Repacker has already installed itself into that app data folder. And so it's not reinstalling itself. It does not realize that file was deleted by the virus scanner. So I'm actually going to need to clear out that app data folder so that Repacker will reinstall itself into app data. So I'll close this, open the folder, delete everything out of here. And now I'll reopen the program. And if that doesn't work for you, there's also this plugins folder. Inside is this plugin pack, which is an install file. So you could also run this. Okay, now when I open Repacker, I see SLK recover. So this is the program that's necessary to get the units deprotected on the Dota map. Unfortunately, because both Repacker and Xdeprotect have the bug where they cannot handle more than 1,000 files, if I use SLK recover inside of Repacker, it will corrupt the map since it will crash after 1,000 files. So that's not an option. So what I really need to do is fix the Xdeprotect Perl script and recompile it to an exe for this to work very well. But what I could do is turn off all of the deprotections from Repacker as well as the embed cheats and allow it to run with Xdeprotect and pause before packing and turn on this SLK recover plugin. And the SLK recover should run before it packs with Xdeprotect, and then I can do my manual script to pack with Xdeprotect to fix the 1,000 file limit. Another option is you could go into the Silk Object Console app that I mentioned earlier and extract the unit data that way. But I prefer to use Repacker since it's built in, even though it's a little buggy. First, let me show you what the SLK files look like. So if I go to Xdeprotect temp, that is where it has extracted everything from the original map file. So if I search for *SLK in this folder, here are all the SLK files. So if I open one, unit abilities, you'll notice it opens in Excel. Sometimes it will have an error. That's fine to ignore. Just don't save the file because Excel will corrupt it. So here's the data that shows in Excel. If I open it in Notepad instead, you'll see it's almost a CSV file, which is comma separated, but it's using a semicolon instead of a comma. There are also specialty tools you can download that are designed for viewing Warcraft III SLK files. But for example, HAMG is the ability name, and that's just a code. So if we went back into the map editor and did module object editor and went to abilities, here we see the real names. And surprisingly, under neutral hostile, there are some pink abilities. For example, this attribute bonus. So some of them did deprotect correctly, but very few. But if I click on view, display values as raw data, you'll notice all of the ability names change to special codes. Those 4-letter codes are the IDs of the abilities that are used by the game engine rather than the full name that's displayed to the user. So if I take this HAMG ability ID and do edit, find, and paste it, if the ability had imported correctly, it would find it. But in this case, it is a custom ability that was lost. And that's why we need to extract it from the SLK file, convert it to the world editor format, and add it to our deprotected map so that we can view the abilities correctly. So that's an example of an SLK file. And obviously there are many more besides just the abilities. So for example, with the unit data, we can see all of the attributes about a unit. This first unit moves on ground rather than flying like some units. This is its turning speed. It can attack ground units, not air units, etc. So this would correspond in the map editor, if I clicked on a unit, to all of these different properties of the unit. And not all of the properties are going to be in one SLK file. There may be multiple SLK files that need to be combined together. And anything that's missing from the SLK will just use the unit defaults. So let's try to recover this data. In MPQ Repacker, I'm going to pick the Dota map and I'll export to my hacks folder and call it SLK. And I'm going to pause before packing so that I can manually copy the files to my Xdeprotect folder and then run the sfmpq commands myself. And I'll make sure in the plugins folder, SLK recover is turned on. Then I'll click rebuild. You just have to be patient if it feels like it's frozen because it will slowly move on to the rest of the files. So you'll notice that MPQ Repacker popped up this command line running Silk Object Optimizer. So it mentions that it could not create this file. So that seems like maybe a permissions issue of some sort. Let's take this file path, users, Devon, app data, roaming, MPQ Repacker, and see what we can find out. So I'm gonna hit Windows R to open the run command and type app data with %signs. And then I'll navigate to MPQ Repacker, plugins, SLK recover. And here you'll notice a few things. Inside the std and meta folders are SLK files, just like we saw previously. And most likely these are similar to our base map files because the dates on them are from 2008. They're very old. So I don't think they're specific to the Dota map that we're deprotecting. But this temp map, W3X, it has a new date. So MPQ repacker must have taken all the SLK files, created a new W3X file, and sent it to the Silk Object Optimizer program. So we need to figure out what this error is. It says it could not create this file. So I have a suspicion that maybe this app data roaming folder is protected in some way. So maybe if I run this Silk Object Optimizer as an admin, it might change things. But first, let's look at this config ini as well. So I'm curious what settings are in here that we might want to manipulate. But first off, we see that there's quite a bit that's in Russian. If you want the full English translation, rather than copying and pasting this into Google Translate, if you go to my GitHub under the repacker plugins Silk Recover SOO, I have a copy of the config ini that has been fully translated to English. So I'm going to click download on this file. And again, I don't know why sometimes Windows thinks that certain files are dangerous. It's saying that it's blocked. I'm going to say keep. There's no possible way an ini file can have a virus inside of it because it's not an executable program. It is just a configuration file with settings. So I'm going to consider it safe. So I'll open up this config ini and I'll copy all of it and I'll paste it into the original config ini that was in Russian. File, save, and I'll keep the file name the same so that it will replace, and hit yes to replace. Now this is strange. It says the file is set to read only. So that's a little different than not having permissions where you need to run it as an admin. So let's check that file. If I go back to the app roaming SLK recover and right click on config ini and do properties, it says read only here. That's strange. I'm not sure why when it was installed by this plugin pack exe, it chose to put it as read only, but I'm going to uncheck that box just because I want to save the English version, and I'll hit OK. Now I'll try to save from Notepad again. Save, replace, yes. It seemed to work that fine. So it doesn't seem like it really needs admin access, which makes me a little surprised that this object optimizer could not save the file. But just to be safe, I'm going to go up one level to plugins, and I'll right click on SLK recover and do properties to see if anything else is read only. And it does have a checkbox here, but it's a square checkbox. If everything in the folder was read only, it would be a standard checkbox. For example, if I uncheck read only, it clears it. If I check it again, it makes it a checkbox. So that means that half of the files are read only and half are not. Just to be safe, I don't want any of them to be read only, so I'll just uncheck the box and hit OK. And it says it's going to change all the files in the subfolders. That's probably not necessary because I doubt that this program is trying to modify existing files. It's probably just reading them and then creating new files. But just to be safe, I want to avoid any possible errors. And then in addition, I think I will try to run this with admin permissions just in case app data is a protected operating system folder. I don't think it is because Notepad was able to save just fine, even though I did not run Notepad as an administrator. So to do that, on my start menu, I will type CMD for command prompt. I'll right click and say run as administrator. I'll hit yes on the permissions dialog, and I'll go to the same folder, change directory, paste my folder, and I want to run this Silk Object Optimizer. My only concern is it may fail to run 2 copies at the same time, and I suspect if I close this program, Repacker will stop waiting for SLK Recover to finish, and it'll move on and mess up my files. So I'll just try running it, but if there's an issue, I might also try copying all these files to my temp directory and running from there. And you'll notice my command prompt says administrator at the front, so I know I have elevated permissions. Okay, to run the program, I'll type Silk and I'll hit the tab to autocomplete. And you'll notice because the program has spaces in it, it puts quotes all around it. I'll hit enter to run. It's giving me the same error. The other thing I wonder is list file with parentheses possibly considered an invalid file name? Let me try to create a file like that. Parenthesis, list file, parenthesis, enter. Okay, that created just fine, so that should not be the issue. Let's try copying this entire SLK recover folder and go into the temp and paste it, and let's run the same program from there. Change to temp folder, change to SLK recover folder, and run Silk Object Optimizer. Same issue. So here we're going to need to do the same thing as we did before, which is basically analyze this executable and figure out what's wrong with it. It might also be interesting to open this config ini and see what settings it has. One thing I notice is it has a work directory called out, and it's trying to save to that out directory. Let's try creating that folder and see if that makes a difference, because maybe the bug is simply that it does not create the folder first. Out, rerun the program. Hey, look at that. All of a sudden, it seems to be working. So, you know, these programs were not made by professional companies, and they're also quite old. So it could be that this bug crept in because of a new version of Windows that had a slightly different default setting, where maybe the old Windows automatically created the folder and the new Windows doesn't. Or it could just be that the tool has always had this bug and people just worked around it by creating that folder, but that knowledge has not been passed down. No one ever fixed the bug, and they didn't create any documentation to explain the bug. So to be a good hacker, you have to learn how to just troubleshoot. And you'll notice I did not know ahead of time what was wrong. I had to try 10 different things. And most likely the read-only that I changed did not matter, and most likely the app data roaming folder did not matter. So don't be afraid to tinker and try to discover what's wrong. So I think I will just kill the repacker program and the object optimizer program. Repacker and task, and I probably could have also just hit the X. And another thing to note is Deprotect has already done its job. I already have a hacked copy of Dota Deprotected. It simply is missing the object editor data, but the map does open in the world editor. So I don't even need to run Deprotect this time. I can just open the MPQ master and drag these files in one at a time and reopen in world editor and see what happens. So I'll just make a backup of Dota Deprotected in case I accidentally corrupt it. And I'll take my MPQ master. I'm going to switch to Dota Deprotected, and I'll take this out folder and I'll just right click in MPQ master and say add directory, and I'll pick that out folder and hit OK, and it will automatically replace any files. So now I can open it up in the world editor, and it looks like the world editor has crashed on opening. So I'm guessing one of these files probably is corrupted in the SLK version, whereas Deprotect had fixed that corruption. So this time let's do a diff between the Deprotect folder and the out folder to see what actually changed. So I'll open WinMerge, file, open, paste in my SLK folder, and also the Dota temp files folder from Deprotect, and hit compare. Now, there's going to be a ton of files that are write-only, which means Deprotect has those files and SLK does not. So here, if I go to view, I can exclude unique items from the right side, and that will show me just the identical files that did not change, as well as the files that did change. So I could open up each of these one at a time and kind of analyze what exactly each program did to make the files different. So from this do file, it seems quite obvious that the one on the right is very different than the one on the left. The one on the left is missing basically everything, and that one from the left is from SLK recover. So remember, the Deprotect ini has these settings for building a do file. So I suspect this is an order of operations thing. SLK, since it was working with the original extracted files from Repacker, and it was only given the SLK files, not the entire map, it did not know how to recreate the do file like Deprotect did. So where I copied everything from SLK recover into my map, I should not have done it with this do file. Let's check the others. So these are quite different. And again, the one on the left looks almost blank, like it's missing all of the Dota code. So it's probably also just a blank base map script. So again, I don't think I should have replaced that. Let's check the next one. MMP looks similar, so I probably should not have replaced that. The one on the left has much less data. And this one's weird. SHD, which I believe is for shadows, it says that the files are different, but when I compare, it says they're identical. So that seems like a bug in WinMerge. W3A, okay, these look very different, and these codes seem to be like abilities or units. And you'll notice on the left side, the yellow shows all the changes. On the right side, you'll notice the yellow ends quite early. So this is one where I think the XLK file is correct. We could look up from this documentation. W3A, it says it's a custom unit file. So this makes sense. We were missing our units and abilities in the object editor. The purpose of SLK is to recover them. So let's keep a note of that. I think so far we want to keep the Deprotect version on everything except for W3A. Now W3C, it says left only. So it was completely missed by Deprotect, but SLK Recover has it. So we'll want to keep both of those. Let's check W3E. Okay, these are quite different, but here on the left side, we see that the SLK version is cut short, whereas the Deprotect version is longer. So I think we want to keep the Deprotect version. W3H is left only, so we'll keep the SLK Recover. W3I, it looks like the right side, the Deprotect, is longer, so I'll keep that version. The W3Q, R, T, and U all only come from SLK, so we'll keep the SLK version. On the WCT, it looks like the Deprotect version is much longer, so we'll keep that version. And I believe that's the trigger file for the visual copy of the JAS code. WPM, again, the Deprotect looks better. WTG, it's not very obvious, but I think the Deprotect version is better because it has one extra line. WTS, the Deprotect looks much longer, so we'll keep that. BLP, this one, it looks like both have a lot of unique changes, but because the Deprotect is longer, I'll keep that one. And I think BLP is like an image file, so I could actually use a Warcraft 3 BLP viewer to see what those differences are, but it doesn't make sense that the SLK files would recover an image. They're only going to recover unit and ability data. So the one on the left is probably just a default image. And the do file, it looks like the Deprotect version is better because it's longer. Okay, so now that we have a list, let's go back to World Editor. Surprisingly, it looks like it did finally open, even though I thought it was frozen. But you'll notice previously when we had it opened, we had a lot of terrain, and now all of a sudden the terrain is gone, but we do seem to have some units. So if I go to Module Object Editor, we can see all of these pink units that have been recovered. And let's check abilities. It also has recovered a bunch of abilities. I'm going to switch back to the names instead of the 4-digit codes because I think it's easier to read. Not that it matters. So this kind of shows what I was discovering with WinMerge is that Deprotect has half of the files correct and SLK has the other half of the files correct. So we're going to need to make a merged copy of our map. And if Deprotect didn't have the 1000 file bug, probably we could have just ran everything smoothly the first time and not had to manually merge everything together. But because we're having to go out of the normal process to work around these bugs and manually do things, that's what's caused these issues. So let me close this from the map editor and let me delete my Dota Deprotected because I made a backup ahead of time. And I don't want to lose my backup, so I'll just make another copy and rename it back to Dota Deprotected. Then inside of MPQ Master, I will do File Reopen. Since I've now replaced the file, I want it to reload. And here I want to be very careful. When I right click and say Add Directory, I want to only add the files I intentionally want to keep. And the easiest way to do that might be in the temp SLK recover out. Maybe I make a copy of this out folder, and then in the original, I can delete all the files that I don't want to be replaced. So if I go back to WinMerge, from do down to SHD, we determined that all of those, the Deprotect version was better. So we want to delete them out of the SLK folder. So I'll highlight do, J, MMP, and SHD, and delete those. And in case we need them back, we have them in the backup still. Next, we determined that for W3A, the SLK version was better, but W3E and I, the Deprotect version was better. So we'll delete the W3E and I from SLK's out folder. W3E, W3I, delete. And these ones that only existed in SLK, we'll just leave them so that they can be added to the MPQ archive. And for WCT down to do, we decided all of those Deprotect was better. So we'll delete them all from the SLK out folder. WCT, WPM, WTG, WTS, BLP, and do. Delete. Okay, let's try one more time. I could hit refresh in WinMerge to make sure, but I'm pretty confident I got it right. So I'll right click in MPQ Master, choose Add Directory, and choose my SLK recover out and hit OK. Previously it said it added 25 files, this time it was only 13. So I'm hoping this is a better copy of the Dota map. So I'll go File, Open, Dota Deprotected, not the copy since that was the backup before we restored the unit data, and hit OK. And last time it seemed to freeze as it was loading, and it took a really long time, but it did finally load correctly. So even if it feels like it's frozen, I'm just going to be patient. We have to remember this is a very large file. It's 200 megabytes. So that may be why World Editor takes a long time to load. And that kind of demonstrates a little bit of the benefit of protection is by deleting all of the World Editor specific files, then someone that just wants to play the game will load more quickly in the Warcraft 3 engine and also download faster from Battle.net when you're queuing up with other players if the file is smaller. I don't think that's generally why people protect their maps. I think it's more because they don't want them to be tampered with, to have people throw in cheats, or to have people take the map in a different direction than how they envision, which I don't blame the authors for doing that protection, but I dislike that it prevents programmers from opening the map to learn the techniques, because by studying how Dota was designed, someone that wants to make a completely different map can learn techniques to make more advanced maps by reading the Dota code. And that's not really plagiarism, because they're still going to write the code themselves and come up with their own ideas. They're just learning. And it's not the type of intellectual property that needs to be protected, because we're not competing against each other. We're all making these games for fun to help each other. So I'd prefer a different alternative than protecting maps. But I do like the benefit of it loading quicker in game. Okay, it finally unfroze and appears to be loading. I was very close to killing World Editor because I thought maybe it had crashed and I thought maybe I'd made a mistake. So I have an extremely fast PC and it took like 10 minutes to load. So on your PC, make sure you're very patient before you assume that it's failed. Okay, so we have all of our environment loading, which we did not have the last time. Let's see if we go into the object editor, if we have units and abilities, and it looks like we do. So I would say this is a fully deprotected map. Obviously, as discussed before, we technically should be actually going into file test map or copying it to our maps folder and running it directly in Warcraft and checking for bugs, making sure everything works correctly. And it's quite possible there's something that's broken, but it's 99% there, I think. And those little kinks could be worked out by hand if needed, but to me, it feels like a fully deprotected map. So that is how to use the SLK recover tool, which is needed for Dota. And that's the interesting thing about deprotecting these maps. We found that with 7 different maps, every single one of them had different types of protection. Some of them had things in common, but each one added a new type of protection that we had to work around. So we still have 2 maps left, Demonic Sword and Twilight's Eve. Let's work on those. So I'll do file close map, and I'll take Demonic Sword and copy it into my X deprotect folder. I'll also delete the files from Dota that we were working with, and I'll open my X deprotect INI and change it to use Demonic Sword for the in-map file. Close and save. Then I'll go back to my command prompt for xdeprotect and run the exe. Looks like it's extracting fine, scanning for unknowns. Okay, we have an issue here. It says cannot read war3map.j. Let's see if we can fix that. So obviously, if I search in here war3 map, I'm not going to find the J file because it's probably in one of these unknowns, and there must just be something formatted strangely so that xdeprotect could not find it. So I'll just take this folder path and copy it, and I'll go into Visual Studio Code, and I'll click this search icon, and then these 3 dots, which gives me extra settings. And inside of files to include, I'll paste in this folder so that it only searches this folder. And under search, I want to type something in that I expect to be inside of a JAS file. So if you're not familiar with what a JAS file typically looks like, you'd want to go into the base map files that you extracted from making a default map, open it, and then just look for patterns of how a typical file is structured. So for example, this keyword function is all over the place. So if I searched for that, it's likely it would find our file. But there's other things we could search for as well. For example, all of these methods here, set camera bounds, etc. I know a lot of them have a prefix of BLZ. So that's another thing I could search for as well. It doesn't necessarily matter what you search for, and if it doesn't find it the first time, you could try other things. But I wouldn't necessarily search for something like this map configuration comment, because even though it's in the base map file, since it's a comment, it doesn't actually execute in the game, it gets ignored. So a programmer might delete that comment or change the comment. So there's no guarantee that the demonic sword map has this particular comment. As well, there are certain functions that are required to happen. Like if you never set your camera boundaries, then it probably will just use a default camera boundary and not necessarily crash. Or if you never set your music, it'll probably just play default music. But I'm assuming if you never run init blizzard, the game will probably just crash and not work. So I'll just search for BLZ. Okay, it found 18,000 results in one file. So if I collapse this, you'll see there is not more than one file, there's only one. But it's this unknown 1A62 file. So if I open this, this obviously looks like a JAS file. So all I need to do is right click, reveal in File Explorer, right click, rename, war3 map.j, and then I'll move it, right click, cut, up to files, right click, paste, and that probably will fix our issue. So let's go back to xdeprotect. Previously we had this error about not finding that file. So let's just run xdeprotect.exe and see what happens. Looks like it is reading the file, so that particular error is fixed. Okay, so here we had an issue. It says out of memory, and that is while creating the WCT file, which is for triggers. So again, that's going to be a bug in xdeprotect. There must be something in the war3 map.j file that is malformed in some way so that xdeprotect crashes when it's trying to read it. And that might be why it didn't find it the first time. Now, this is probably okay because if we remember, the trigger file is just so that the map editor can show us visually what the triggers are. But we already know that the war3 map.j is the only thing the game engine actually cares about. And for these very complicated maps, you're not going to do the visual trigger editor anyways. And if you were to ever hit save, it's just going to replace the war3 map.j with a compiled version of what we see visually. xdeprotector in the past has simply made one single node in here, and on the right side it wasn't even visual, it was just the plain text. So it's really done a poor job at resurrecting the visual triggers anyways. So what I think we could do in this situation is just disable the restoring of the visual triggers in xdeprotect to remove the out of memory error. And then we can just use the visual triggers from a base map file. If we do that, we'll have to remember we can never hit save in the world editor without corrupting our file. The file will still work, but the war3 map.j will be deleted. So we'll just always remember to keep our own copy of the war3 map.j and edit it with our own tools like Visual Studio Code. And after world editor saves the map, we'll want to copy in the war3 map.j that we've been editing with the external tool. So it's a little bit annoying. It almost means the map's not fully deprotected because you can't hit save in world editor without ruining your triggers, but the workaround to fix that is very simple. It's just an extra step to remember. So I think that will be fine in this case. Now, if we wanted to take the time, we could also debug the Perl script, figure out why it's getting the out of memory error and fix that, but that will have to wait for another day. So I'm going to xdeprotect, opening the INI, and I'm going to look for where it's restoring the triggers. So right here it says recover script, create WTG, WCT files, and enable additional options based on map scripts recovery. So by looking at the command line, I know it failed on the WTG, WCT files. So I definitely want to disable this setting. However, I'm a little bit nervous about the additional options below that are enabled by this. If I scroll down, it has this rename reserved functions, inline functions, rename globals, indent script. So I think all of these will be disabled because we're not recovering the script. Most likely that'll be fine, but there's a slight chance, for example, renaming the reserved functions, by that not running, our map might not deprotect fully without us fixing those by hand. These others, the inline functions, globals, and indent script, probably don't matter. The inline is very rarely going to cause a compiler error if it's not done. And the renaming and indenting is just to make the script easier to read. So I think we're probably fine with those turned off, but I am a little bit nervous. Without recovering the script, I don't think it'll be able to parse the W3 data. And without parsing the W3 data, I don't think it will recover the do file. So if that happens, we may need to actually figure out why it's getting the out of memory error and fix that so that it can recover correctly. But let's just cross our fingers. So I'll save this where it's not going to recover the script. And I'll go back to my command line, run xdeprotect, hope that it gets past the out of memory error. And it looks like it did, but I know that because it has more than 1,000 files, the MPQ file is going to be corrupted. So I'm going to need to rerun sfmpq manually from the command line. Okay, so back to the temp folder, I'm going to delete the out MPQ. Then I will go into the temp folder in the command line with the change directory command, and then go into the files folder, and I'll clear my screen with CLS just so I can see what I'm doing better. I'll hit the up arrow to get my original sfmpq command that I was using previously. Again, we'll want to make sure we run it for both files since they both have contents, and we'll want to right click on files and do properties to get a count to make sure we're doing it large enough. So we're doing 8,000. There are only 2,460 files, so we should be fine. I'll run it first for the list file. Now that it's ended, I'll run it again for files.txt. And now I'm going to look with a hex editor at the MPQ file and the original W3X file so I can copy the 512 bytes header. With my hex editor, I'm going to open the original W3X, and I instantly see that the HMW header is missing. It only has the MPQ. So that's not going to help me. So instead, I'll open one of the other maps that I was deprotecting. And I remember, for example, Pest Invasion had that header. So I'll copy this header. It will give my map the wrong name, and that's fine. I can fix it in the world editor afterwards. So edit, block, and chars, 512, okay. Edit, clipboard, copy. Then with my other hex editor, open in the temp folder for demonic sword, out.mpq, and edit, clipboard, paste. File, save as, go up to my hacked folder, and I'll call this demonic.w3x. So let's see if this will open in the world editor. Pick demonic, hit OK. There's a chance there will be some other form of protection that we did not check for example, having a large number of regions. But I generally don't look for every type of protection every time. I just try to open it in the world editor and see what errors I get and only try to fix those particular ones. So it looks like it failed because triggered data is missing or invalid. And that makes perfect sense because we told xdeprotect not to recover the WCT or WTG files. So I'll hit OK. I'm just going to copy them from the base map because we already discussed that if this trigger editor tab is missing the script, it'll be fine. I'll just remember whenever I save to get it from war3map.j. But before I do that, I will double check this file format and just look at those two files. WTG says it's triggers. WCT also says it's trigger. So I'm pretty confident it'll be fine to replace those with the base map file. So I'll go to MPQ master, open my hacked copy of demonic. I'll right click, add file, go to my base map folder and pick those two files. And at the bottom it says 2 files added. So I should be safe to reopen in the world editor the demonic hacked map. So it looks like the map loaded correctly. All the environment graphics are there. Let me go to module object editor. All our units are pink, meaning they've been modified from the defaults. So it looks to me like a fully deprotected map. Let's just try, if I go into the trigger editor, you'll see all these visual triggers, they're completely wrong. They're just the default, and they're not going to match the actual code for demonic. So I'll just delete the melee initialization visual trigger, and I'll right click and make a new trigger. But instead of a visual trigger, I'm going to do a custom script so that I just get a plain text box. And I'll try pasting in the code, which was our war3map.j file that we got from that unknown file. I'll copy it and paste it in here. I'm just curious if world editor can understand it when I hit save. Okay, now it says it's going to generate start locations. that has me a little bit nervous because that's one thing it probably misunderstood about the war3map.j. If we look at the base map file for war3map.j, here it has define start location, and it's inside of the config function. I suspect in the war3map.j that we resurrected from the unknown file, it's probably missing this call, or it's missing a config function. So let's just search and find it. Control F for find, paste in define start location. It is here, and it's actually even in a function called config. So there's no reason that the world editor shouldn't have recognized this, but there must be something in this file that's just slightly malformed, which confused both Deprotection and the world editor, because remember, Deprotection got an out of memory error trying to analyze this script. So really, we should do some trial and error here to figure out what portion of the file is corrupted so that we can fix the out of memory error, and that will probably also fix the world editor error. And I would do that probably by highlighting large sections of code and deleting them to essentially make a simplified version of the script, and do trial and error where I would run it against Deprotection after each section has been deleted until the out of memory error goes away, and then I would restore small sections at a time until the out of memory error comes back. And that would help me narrow down what specific piece of the code is the issue, and then from there I would figure out how to fix it. But honestly, I don't think it's worth messing with any of that, because the truth is we don't want to use this trigger editor anyways. It's only useful for very simple maps for someone that does not know proper coding and wants to use the visual tool. In our case, I'll just delete this script and restore the original visual script that we had. And I'll just always remember, anytime I save, I need to take my external war3map.j and paste it with MPQ master into my map before I run it. So in that instance, I would say this map is only 99% deprotected, but fixing that trigger issue is going to take a while of troubleshooting, and it's probably just not worth the effort. So I'm going to call that good enough and move on to our last map. Close this map, don't save, and let's do Twilight's Eve. So I'll copy that and go into the Deprotect folder, delete demonic and deprotected, and then I'll paste in Twilight's Eve, copy the name of the map, open my INI file, paste in my new map name, and I'll want to remember to undo the change I made earlier, which was telling it not to recover the script, because even though it failed for demonic, there's a good chance it will work just fine for Twilight's Eve. And we definitely want to try every type of deprotection possible and only disable the ones that are failing. Okay, now I'll go back to my Deprotect command line and run the program. Looks like it's extracting. This one's taking a really long time. There must be a lot of files, but I guess that happened with Dota and demonic as well. A good clue if you're wondering, is it working? Should I give up? Obviously, if the program's acting responsive, it's fine. But in the case of world editor, sometimes I thought it was unresponsive when it wasn't. Well, just look at your file size. If your map is 250 megs, that's a good indicator that it's going to take a long time. So just be extra patient if it's a really long map file. Maybe go take a snack break in the kitchen and come back. It looked like it finally finished. So let's see how it did. I don't see any specific errors, but I suspect since there were more than 1,000 files, it did probably say it errored adding the files to the MPQ, but unfortunately that message only shows for a split second and disappears. So I'll just assume I have to rerun that by hand. So I'll close out of this, go back to my temp folder, delete my out MPQ, and then go into my temp folder in the command line into the files folder. And then I'll hit the up arrow to get my sfmpq command back. And first, let's just double check. Both files and list file have contents, so we need to run it for both. And if I do properties on files, I have 2,400 files roughly, so 8,000 should be plenty with my -m command. So I'll hit enter. And now that that's finished, I'll do the same thing with list file.txt. Up arrow, list file, enter. Now that that's finished, we're going to need to copy the 512 bytes out of the header. So I'll go to my hex editors. And remember, previously with demonic, we copied in the header from pest invasion. So really in the world editor, I should have gone into the map settings and fixed the name back to demonic, but that's okay. So let's close out of these files in the hex editor and open the out MPQ from xDeprotect temp. And we know that should be missing the header, but let's check if it was in the original Twilight's W3X. It looks like it's missing, so again, we're gonna have to get it from Pest Invasion or any other random map. Okay, edit block and chars 512, okay. Edit clipboard copy, switch to our out MPQ, edit clipboard paste, file save as. In the hacked folder, we'll call it Twilight W3X. Save. Now let's see if it will open in the world editor. Maybe we'll get lucky this time and there's no extra deprotections, but I kind of doubt it. It looks like it might be frozen on loading units. I'm going to leave it running in the background, but while it's running, I'm just going to check for some common protection issues to try to multitask. So if we go to the Twilight's file, let's first check the region file, war3 map.w3r, I thought, but I don't even see it in here. So let's check the base map files to see what files are even just missing. Okay, yes, it is called W3R. I'm not sure why it's not here. So that may be one thing we'll need to copy over. It looks like the do file is there. Now we don't know if any of them are corrupted, but at least we know it's there. We already determined conversation JSON is not needed. It looks like both have a J file. Okay, the world editor actually crashed with some kind of error. So I have no idea what the cause of that was, but at least we know the map's failing and we didn't just need to wait longer. So I'll close this. And I think since I already suspect the W3R has an issue, I might just copy over the base map files one at a time until that error goes away. But I'll keep a backup of the original so that way I can figure out which file is corrupt and go from there. So I'll go to my hacked folder, copy and paste Twilight's to -broken, and in MPQ master open the Twilight which we've hacked but is still not working in the map editor. And if we compare each of these files from left to right, we can see that the base map files has a conversation JSON, a W3C, and a W3R that are missing on the right side, which was extracted from the Twilight map with xDeprotector. But before we do a diff between each file to see what might be corrupt in the Twilight map, let's first just add the missing files. So I'll add those three to see if that fixes anything. So in MPQ master, right click add file, and in the folder that pops up, I'll switch to base map files and pick those three files and hit OK. We'll notice at the bottom it says 3 added, 0 replaced. It would be important to monitor that replaced, because if we accidentally replaced a file that already existed, we'd want to know that, because it may have been a file that wasn't corrupt and we've now deleted the custom Twilight code since we took it from the base map. So it's good we didn't replace anything. Let's open the Twilight and see if it loads this time, because maybe those files being missing was the issue. And I'll try to keep an eye on where it crashes, because that might give a clue, since last time the entire program just crashed. So far it looks like it's somewhere inside of loading units, but we'll see if it ever gets past this. And I'll be patient because I know this is a big map, but it does feel like it might possibly be frozen. While I'm at it, let's just look at those base map files to remember what they're used for. So the region file, since that's just the visual regions that later get converted to code inside of war3 map.j, I don't think that file being missing in Twilight will hurt anything. If I wanted to recover the original region, I could open this, kind of analyze the binary data inside of it. I'd probably need to use a hex editor instead. And then I could search the unknown files and see if there's any with a similar format. And that's how we recovered the JAS file with the previous map. But I don't think that's necessary for the region file, since they probably just actually deleted it, considering it's only needed by the world editor and not by the game itself. And even without regions, we can still edit the JAS file. Looks like world editor crashed again. I'm curious about the WCT file, so I'm going to go back to the file format. And I remember from the previous map, it was a trigger file. So again, that one should be fine to get just from the base map. It's a little strange though that the WTG, I believe, is also a trigger file, and that one xDeprotector was able to recover, considering these two kind of go hand in hand. But that's okay. Since we're still crashing, I'm going to assume that one of these files is corrupt inside of Twilight, but I don't necessarily know which one it is. So I'm going to now start replacing files, and I'll keep a backup. So maybe I'll rename this broken to broken1, and I'll make another copy of Twilight and call it broken2. That way I have a history of each file that I replace as I'm testing, so that if I get to a scenario where I fixed it, I can kind of revert the changes I made to get to that point and make sure I only replace the files that I have to. For example, right now, maybe I right click to add files, and I'll just select all of them, which I know is going to delete a lot of custom code out of Twilight. And I just want to make sure that at least one of the files is the issue. So now I'll launch in the editor and open Twilight. And if this loads, then I know for sure I can fix it by at least replacing one file, but I don't necessarily know which file it was. But a lot of trial and error is about narrowing down your problem as quick as possible. And so where I've got 15 files here, if I did them one at a time, it's going to take a long time to test each one. And what if none of them actually fixes it? And I'm actually analyzing the wrong files and it's something else that's corrupt. Well, that's why in the beginning, you want to start with big changes and keep a backup. And then once you discover something that works, narrow it down to a smaller change. So maybe now I would go back to my previous backup and replace just the top 5 or 6 files and see if that fixes it. If it does, I know I've narrowed it down within that list. If it doesn't, I can skip down to the second group of 6, and then I can do the final few that are remaining. So obviously it did open, which is great. So I'm going to close the map, go back to broken2, delete this Twilight I'm working on that is fixed but missing a lot of code, and I'll copy broken2 back down to the original file I'm working with. Then in MPQ master, I will reopen so that it refreshes. Then I'll right click to add, and this time I'll just pick a few of the files. Now it seemed like it was crashing while it was loading units. So my first suspicion is maybe this units.do, and then my second guess might just be this regular do. So maybe I'll start with both of those and see if that fixes it. So I'll add them. It says 2 were replaced. Now I'll reopen in World Editor. And if this fixes it, then I might try each of those 2 files individually. Okay, it looks like that did fix it. But obviously because I replaced those, even though I still have the terrain, I'm missing all of my units. So let's close this and revert again to the broken2, reload in MPQ master. And this time, instead of replacing both of the do files, I'll just do the units.do, and let's reload in Warcraft. My hope is this time at least maybe we'll have trees, but not buildings. And it looks like that is correct. So now we have our trees and other random doodads, but we are missing all the units that are placed down by default. Now, I think that's just going to be a visual thing. I believe the War3 map.j still has the code to create the units, but it's nice to be able to visualize it too. I could be wrong on that. So I would not call this a fully deprotected map since those units are not rendering, but it's close. So what we'd want to do in this situation is go back to our Twilight files, look at the war3 map units.do and figure out what's wrong with it. And then also go back to our X deprotector ini and figure out what happened here. So we have the setting turned on for build dummy do. We have recover script, we have parse data, and we have build do. So this should have recovered it. However, in the comment here, it says so far only starting points. So I suspect that this code was never finished. And if we were to open the war3 map.j with Visual Studio Code, we could probably find code in here that creates the units during the config or startup. And the ini says that it gets the starting points, which comes from right here, and puts them into the do file. But it looks like it's unfinished code. They did not script it to grab the units out of the JAS file and put them into the do file. So this is a situation where someone's going to need to finish Deprotector to add this additional feature to remove this type of corruption. And that's going to be out of the scope of this particular video, but maybe I can do an update in the future when that code has been corrected. So in this case, I would still call it a mostly deprotected map, but what you'd want to do is any code changes you make when you go to test the map, if the map is broken because the units are not displaying on the screen, which I think will not be the case, I think it'll still work. But if it did, you'd want to open an MPQ master, the new map you saved with World Editor, and the old map that's still protected. And you'd want to go to Operation Extract All with both of them, and then do WinMerge and find out what changes you made intentionally in the World Editor and copy over just those changes to the protected map. And that should be a safe approach. The other thing you could do is, since we've replaced the do file for units in our map with a base map copy of the file, there are no units anywhere on the screen. If I simply click on the units I want and place them down, then when I save, I should have a valid do file. The only problem is there's probably not supposed to be a peasant right here in the real map. So I would actually want to open my JAS file, read through it, and figure out what those starting units are supposed to be, and then intentionally pick the correct unit and put it in the right spot, and then save it to get my do file. So the best way to do that would be if I create a brand new map and I save it as no units. And just so I don't have to use the MPQ master to extract it, I'm going to save it as a folder, and I'll make a new folder called no units and save. Now, if I go into that folder, all the files are already extracted. I prefer to use this method when I'm working on a map, because then I can commit my map directly to GitHub with all of the files separate, and it gives me a full history of every change I've made with each version of the map. But now I'm going to add a single peasant somewhere. File, save map as, one unit as a folder, save, and do a WinMerge between these two. One unit W3X and no unit W3X. Okay, so we can see that the W3I changed, the BLP changed, the do changed, and the J changed. What I'm most curious about is the J, because I suspect we should be able to parse the JAS script to figure out which units have been added and use that to afterwards reconstruct the do file, because I suspect that's what Deprotect is doing for the starting unit locations. So let's open up the J. We see there's a section called unit creations, and it's calling Blizzard create unit with skin. And I imagine if we had multiple units, then this same line would just be copied and pasted a bunch of times. And it looks like it also has a section for buildings. So let's see if we can find something like Blizz create unit with skin inside of the Twilight War3 map.j. Okay, by searching for it, there are a bunch here. And the function names have really weird names. So I suspect if we renamed these functions to something like create units for player, then if Deprotect was coded to parse it correctly, it could do it. But remember, this is something that Deprotect was not even coded for. So instead, we would probably need to take these coordinates and these unit codes, find them in the palette, and find that exact coordinate and click it down, and then save in order to get our do file. Hopefully there's not too many units that are created by default. And we would want to be careful which functions we're doing this from, because we only want to do it with ones that are part of the initialization code, because there could be code that runs based on a specific event in the game. Like when you enter a specific region that's like a coliseum or a arena, maybe it spawns a bunch of units that you have to kill. We don't want something like that to be added to the do file, because the do file is only the units that are created by default when the map first loads. So you want to be careful which functions you copy it from, and you could determine that by taking this function name, searching for it to see where it's used. So here I see another weird function name, which I'll want to copy, but that's the only place that this function is called. So then I just want to trace up the stack to see which function calls this parent function. And again, I got a weird function name, but I suspect pretty soon I'll get to the top, and it looks like I did. It's from function main. So this is definitely something that would run at startup. And if it wasn't, I would see something like trigger action like this. These are things that happen only on a specific event. And so you'll see for the trigger right above, it registered the event, which is when a neutral player purchases an item. So if this remove purchased item function was creating a unit, that's not something we would want to add from the palette to get it saved into our do file, because that's based on a specific event. It's not the main function. So really, we just want to start with the main function, go through all of these weird function names, and trace the path down and find every unit that is created by code and add it directly with a palette and save. So unfortunately, that's a very manual process. If there's enough interest, I think it would definitely be valuable to modify the Perl script to parse this directly. I don't know how difficult that would be, but it'd be a fun exercise for the future. So I apologize that this video was so long, but I wanted to make sure I covered every possible deprotection technique. There may be some I missed. So if you have a map that you cannot deprotect after following all the steps in this video, please mention it in the comments and I will do my best to help you deprotect it. And I think I'll call that a success with the Twilight map, because it's as close as we can get with automated tools, and we have a manual process for the final piece. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you have any questions, please write them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.